Chapter 281. Final Consciousness Clone. The explosion of the welcoming array was too wide. Even if Yang Chen escaped in time, he was still swept away by the aftermath of the explosion. The shuttle swayed. Fortunately, although the shuttle was not a pure protection magic weapon, it still had a certain protective ability. It was swept away unscathed by the aftermath of the explosion, but it caused a shock. Yang Chen was in the shuttle and endured that kind of crazy shock. After a while, everything disappeared and calmed down. How could this level of explosion and spiritual disturbance not attract attention? However, when Yang Chen chose a location, it was an inaccessible place for most. For a moment, he was not afraid of someone coming over. As for the greatest heaven sect, it was a long way from it. Even if it's the strongest master, it would take at least a month for him to come over. Driving the shuttle, Yang Chen returned to the location where the layout was. Then with an action, he quickly summoned the 5 women and carefully collected the scattered materials. These were some rare materials. Even if they have been damaged once, the material itself would not change. Moreover, leaving these things in place would give people a lot of clues, and Yang Chen would not be so careless. The materials that blasted into the distance had been bound by a larger circle of law within a small circle, and the spiritual disturbance was so fierce that it was not easy to find. At that moment when the two sides exploded at the same time, no one noticed at the greatest heaven sect side that the carrier cultivator trembled. Then, a black gas slammed out of him and instantly returned to the black hole above the formation. Yang Chen's array of black holes at that moment of the explosion suddenly became a complete circle. A glimpse of the black gas that was so incomprehensible drilled into a corner of the array. With the explosion, the piece of hidden black gas was thrown high and then fell in a certain area. Very casually, the 5 women collected all the materials scattered around them. One of them unsuspectingly tried to take a part of the hidden black gas. The black gas suddenly pounced on her and disappeared into her 7 orifices. The eyes of the female disciple shone a burst of light that was different from the earlier one. It flashed but immediately recovered the same wooden look again. According to Yang Chen's order, the fragments of the array in the field of vision were naturally packed up. Then all of them arrived at the side of Yang Chen. Yang Chen then ordered them to return. Now in the dome of the temple, in addition to a mess, there was nothing to be found. With a satisfied smile, he called out the shuttle and quickly flew towards the direction of the Pure Yang Palace. After 2 days of continuous flight, Yang Chen took the shuttle back and then found a hidden place to arrange the illusionary array. He then flashed inside. The dome appeared quickly and Yang Chen didn't think more and went inside. Among the halls, the 5 women were occupying a corner, sitting on the ground and doing their work silently. This was their normal state. If there were no other instructions from Yang Chen, they would do their work here and increase their cultivation. This speed of their cultivation was comparable to those of genius disciples. You don't have to pretend. Yang Chen looked at the female disciple who was attacked by the black gas. He then suddenly said, "They are all my puppets. Oh, they are all under my control. You think that you can't make me see through your tricks?" The strength of the 3 purities' secret art was such that even this guy who was a Great Principle Golden Immortal could not hope to guess. Naturally, he did not know that his every move had already been clearly understood by Yang Chen. Brush. The reaction of the female disciple was not slow, she stood up immediately. However, she seemed to know that the 49 flying swords flying above the dome were very powerful, so she still stood and did not make a provocative move. If her flesh was to die again, his consciousness would have no other chance against death. Who dare move I divide body? It was not known if he couldn't get acquainted with this body or because the consciousness was too seriously damaged while the avatar was descending. The original female disciple spoke intermittently, one word at a time. It was very awkward. Well, it is not good to be blessed in your immortal world. Do you have to suffer this in? Yang Chen snorted, you are loyal to your ancestral sect. Unfortunately, you met me. The other party seemed to realize that it was not good. He didn't know what technique was being used. The 2 female disciples on both sides of her side stood up and faced her. The spiritual awareness suddenly let go and seemed to be sending power to this female disciple. These 2 days were enough to refine and consume her body's original and these 2 other female disciples' consciousness completely. The 2 other female disciples were now enhancing her consciousness too. Although her consciousness had been almost completely refined, the remaining instinct was still able to greatly enhance its strength. It was a pity that it was originally a conscious body that was weakened by 10,000 times. Even so, there was still the strength of the Daching realm. It was only through the toss of Yang Chen's formation that the consciousness was divided into 6 parts. The other 5 were already refined, leaving only one which had also fallen from the Daching realm to Yuanying realm. Originally, if she was to be left alone to quietly absorb all the consciousnesses and that only the instinct remained, it was still expected that she would recover to the Daching realm. At that time, controlling the bodies of these 5 females would still present a challenge. But she only had absorbed 2, yet had been discovered by Yang Chen. The memories had been lost a lot and most of the rest was only instinct. It was not very clear that this consciousness was even someone. It was only instinctively aware that the sword formation at the top of her head was dangerous. The instinct knew that Yang Chen was an enemy and must be destroyed, apart from that she did not know anything. According to the usual practice, the lower realm descent of the consciousness entering the body of the consciousness carrier cultivator involved strong resistance from the carrier. The force of the initiative consciousness would be weakened rapidly, so usually after the descent it only lasted for a few days. After that time, it would dissipate. However, the 5 women did not have an active consciousness, they were more suitable than any consciousness carrier that the greatest heaven sect had arranged. There was no active sense of resistance and were primed for a conscious mind. This allowed the initiative consciousness to easily possess this body. In this case, it was not a question of how long it could survive. It was entirely possible to practice again through this body. When the realm was raised, the memories would be restored one by one and it may become a formidable master in the future. It was not the greatest heaven sect who did not want to find a carrier of consciousness that was completely inactive. It was really too difficult. The carrier cultivator must have the cultivation base of the Zhanxian stage, and the masters who reached this realm were almost all conscious and determined. It was not easy to force them to become vegetables. Trained from an early age. How could an idiot practice to the realm of Zhanxian? Even if you use a lot of spiritual power to infuse into the body every day. It was impossible to cultivate a state of mind without improvement. Under this circumstance, the greatest heaven sect could only use other methods, such as trying to hypnotize the carrier cultivator as much as possible and destroy his sense of being with powerful spiritual awareness. In any case, it was still a poor line and could not be completely done without a little initiative awareness. If the consciousness of the body was a little bit strong, it could spell annihilation for the initiative consciousness. Even if it does not rebound for a while, it would in turn reverse the possessing consciousness and completely suppress it within a few days. After all, it was the original being with a natural advantage. Although he couldn't remember many things, the conscious body was still instinctively aware and these bodies on Yang Chen's side were more suitable for their own conscious body. Unfortunately, before he fully recovered, he must face the suppression of Yang Chen. Very daring. She suddenly screamed. Even if he didn't remember who he was, he still understood that his identity was noble. He was not an ant-like guy who you could offend. The female disciple was speaking loudly, but the body did not dare to move, fearing that the sword array at the top would ruin this most suitable body. Yang Chen certainly knew what she was worried about. Similarly, he had also very much cherished these 5 women who were in the Zhanxian stage and did not want them to be eliminated in vain. After all, the 5 female 5 sides profound woman formation was also good, the beautiful girls formation was also good, it was completely easy to control a Yuning master, it was his effective helping hand, if it was ruined, it would be a pity. However, in the face of a 1/6 consciousness with a fallen Dacheng realm cultivation base, how could Yang Chen be afraid? He laughed coldly and yelled at him, "Do you want to collect all the avatars? Consciousnesses? I will help you." The 2 female disciples behind him flew to the back of Yang Chen and his body flew up in a strange way. One side left and right and the forehead touched the head of Yang Chen, so they hung in the air. "Come on. With my consciousness, if you have the ability, all of you come together." Yang Chen screamed at the other side, his hands opened and his silhouette pictured an avatar of a large open door at the middle. If there were outsiders, they would feel that Yang Chen was a rogue. There were 2 beautiful women hanging behind me. There were 3 in front of him. Yang Chen's arms were open just like a sexual harasser. The opposite female disciple saw Yang Chen's posture, her eyes jerked brightly, and her mind was moved. The 2 female disciples were also like the female disciples behind Yang Chen. The same flight flew behind her, touching her forehead and her back. This position was the easiest to convey the spiritual awareness. In general, the duality of the spiritual awareness was possible through a few postures, the foreheads were opposite to each other, or the cerebellums were opposite each other, or the forehead was opposite to the back of the cerebellum, or the heads were at opposites. When the 2 women put on this position, the sense of the avatar perceived that the speed of absorbing the original consciousness was greatly accelerated and in a short period of time, half of his cultivation base had been restored. Although the active consciousness was only 1/6 of the original, the instinct was still there. She and the 2 female disciples had absorbed 4 of the 6 parts, accounting for more than 2/3. The opposite, Yang Chen's group occupied almost 1/3. Even if Yang Chen was by himself, what could change? It seemed that his recovery was expected. Brush. The figure of the female disciple with her 2 companions behind her stood directly opposite Yang Chen. He also knew that Yang Chen's control of the sword formation on his head could only be controlled with a thought, so he did not intend to fight with Yang Chen. If the consciousness battle has the upper hand, he was afraid that these things of Yang Chen would not become his own. The foreheads of the two women touched each other in an instant. The instinctive consciousness of the original Great Principle Golden Immortal suddenly directed the attack. Which of the ones who had ascended had not been in a deadly fight before, how could he not understand the benefits of an active attack? Already absorbed 2/3 of the power, infinitely close to the Daching realm's spiritual awareness, rushed directly into Yang Chen's sea of consciousness and soon discovered that in the sea, another third of the instinctive consciousness already exists. She had the urge to immediately fuse with it. The fusion of the spiritual awareness was very good and it was completed in a flash. Immediately, the consciousness avatar began to madly attack Yang Chen's sea of consciousness. If it got destroyed, Yang Chen could be controlled as per her wishes. Even if she had forgotten a lot of memories, good or bad, could still be recovered. Even if only 1/6 of the active consciousness was left in the avatar, if the active consciousness was not extinguished, it would recover a little with the further improvements in the future. With these 5 avatars that were best for him, he may be able to achieve 5 external body incarnation divine abilities. Restoring the complete sense of the avatar did not encounter any resistance in Yang Chen's sea of consciousness, as if Yang Chen's sea of consciousness was empty and everything was normal. Even the avatar's consciousness was amazed. Yang Chen's sea of consciousness was extremely vast. It was impossible to have such a huge sea of consciousness in the Daching realm. This guy was not at all simple. The red area appeared in front of him and the conscious mind rushed over without thinking about it. However, here was Yang Chen's sea of consciousness, he was subjected to Yang Chen's restrictions, although the spiritual awareness of the avatar felt his movements as being very fast, but they instead were as slow as an old cow's climb, it would take a while for him to rush to the front. The red was a long river of blood. Strictly speaking, it should be on the top of the avatar. However, in the consciousness, there was no difference between the top and bottom, but it was very difficult to get close to this bloody river. Since it was so difficult to come, Yang Chen must have cherished this bloody long river, and his sea of consciousness was also extremely vast, certainly it had relationship with this scarlet river. Although it was impossible to judge what was wrong with it, but the avatar knew instinctively, and to kill Yang Chen's consciousness, this bloody river was the key. If it was broken, anything would not be a problem. He almost didn't want to think about it. The avatar consciousness used its own maximum speed, directly ignoring the power of various obstructions. It leapt like a horse, just like a victorious general going straight towards the yellow dragon, it rushed into the bloody river. If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more. Chapter 282. The greatest heaven sect wanted to cry but had no tears. As soon as he entered the long river of blood, the endless killing intent within behaved like the essence, invading into the avatar consciousness. It was a conscious body that was already a Great Principle Golden Immortal, but in the face of the bloody long river that merged with the Immortal Executioner Stage killing intent, it was still not enough to bear. Bang. The avatar consciousness was shocked by this killing intent. For a while, he stayed in the same place motionless. The Immortal Executioner Stage originally was to kill immortals, even if it was a Great Principle Golden Immortal, there was a natural fear in the face of a killing intent at Immortal Executioner's Stage. When even the spirits like those of Wan Qian's group were turned into idiots and couldn't move again. When the avatar consciousness was within the blood river, it suddenly saw an immortal beheading blade with a scent of immortal killing intent, its shock increased manifold. It was just an ordinary avatar consciousness, where could it be as powerful as the real being? When the immortal beheading blade directly killed the avatar consciousness, the group consciousness still had no reaction, it was directly annihilated by all the active consciousness. There was no more mentality left. In the moment when the meaning of the avatar dissipated, Yang Chen's mind suddenly received 2 very clear news. The first one, of course, was the Heavenly Court rebellion that Yang Chen had known since long ago. Profound Heaven sect had already entered the Heavenly Court, even the sect master had started to serve as the Jade Emperor. The second news made Yang Chen somewhat surprised. It turned out to be a secret plane opening. This secret land was not the secret plane of a sect after being destroyed. It was arranged by the predecessor of the greatest heaven sect. It had been arranged for a special year. After that, it was reserved for the younger generation, but its information was kept by a rogue cultivator that had ascended recently. Profound Heaven sect was in the immortal world. They got the message and passed it down. However, this secret plane was somewhat special. Although the owner of the secret land estimated the danger involved in crossing the dense ground in detail, this conscious body had forgotten most of the content. It only remembered about the location, opening method, and that it was dangerous inside the secret land. He didn't know what the danger was. When the consciousness clone descended into the lower realm from the immortal world, there seemed to have occurred a very painful injury. It was estimated that it affected this memory of the secret ground. Although it was very dangerous, Yang Chen did not feel that it was an unworthy secret. Why would the profound heaven sect use the conscious mind to pass the news down? Moreover, although there were many casualties in the greatest heaven sect, the following was a more rapid development, which had already explained a lot. Here, Yang Chen was still hesitating about how to deal with the secret land. The greatest heaven sect had already blown up the pot. The burst of the array was not strong, the violent one was the channel above the array. Yang Chen had chosen a valley which was surrounded by mountains. Secondly, Yang Chen arranged several protective arrays on the surrounding mountains, so despite the explosion, he had it contained in a small area. The materials were all collected with the debris from the aftermath of the explosion, covering thousands of miles. There weren't any explosions of the same magnitude on the greatest heaven sect side of the channel, but they still covered hundreds of square miles of the sect's area. The welcoming array was in the interior of the mountain protecting Great Formation. It could be said that the interior of the greatest heaven sect was undefended. This time, the explosion was at least 10 times stronger than the dozens of 10th water yin thunder that Liang Shaming detonated. The tragedy was that in the same year, there was an old tree demon in Pure Yang Palace, which swallowed all the 10th water yin thunder. Using his powerful body to block the power of it. The greatest heaven sect was not so lucky. Not to mention whether there were any masters of the Daching realm who were willing to sacrifice their lives to protect the sect. Even if there were, they could not cover such a large-scale explosion. The crazy explosion directly destroyed hundreds of miles into the ground. Several high-level members of the sect were stationed at the edge of the formation, while the center of the array was protected by 3 masters of the Daching realm. All of them had died, and their magical weapons were directly destroyed, while several other high-level body protection magic weapons were also damaged to varying degrees. Even in the farther places, each house was destroyed. Within 300 miles, the disciples below the Jitan realm, within 500 miles, disciples in the middle of the foundation stage, all perished. The mountain protecting Great Formation was directly destroyed from the inside. Before getting it rearranged, it could no longer be launched. The entire Greatest Heaven sect was now under no protection. The high-level members of the Greatest Heaven sect, under the guard of the 3 Daching realm masters with the strength of their own protective magic weapons, did not suffer any harm. But the 3 masters who guarded them on the outside had different degrees of injuries. In a short time, it was almost impossible to fight with others. Seeing the hell-like scenery in the sect, several high-level leaders, including the sect master, wanted to cry, but simply had no tears. Who would have thought that there would be problems with the operation of the welcoming array that had been going on for thousands of years? The high-level members of the sect currently remaining were not fools, they knew the importance of the master of the Daching realm, who had rushed out to find the spiritual fluctuations that all others also felt. If the elder could find evidence that someone was also arranging a similar welcoming array, then this was all a conspiracy against the Greatest Heaven sect. No matter who the perpetrator was, no matter how big the backing he had, the sect master and the elders had vowed in their hearts that they must pay the price of this conspiracy against their Greatest Heaven sect. But now, everyone's energy was still concentrated on rushing to clean up the mess. Moreover, the destruction of the mountain gate always required an external account, whether it was true or not, it was always necessary. Such an enormous matter, though hard to conceal, needed to be brushed under the rug from prying eyes. Last time, the Pure Yang Palace pushed the boat directly to the water and planted it on the head of the 100,000 mountains. There would always be someone in the area. In fact, it was only used to play along Yang Chen's idea, but it also served the Pure Yang Palace. A perfect excuse. Others didn't know of it, but the Greatest Heaven sect top management was clear that Pure Yang Palace had long wanted to occupy 100,000 mountains. But for now, it seemed that there were not enough opponents to let the Greatest Heaven sect borrow weight and pull everyone's hatred over there. To let the Greatest Heaven sect admit that they were disturbed when they took the celestial consciousness into this lower realm, they could not afford to lose this person. For a time, to render appropriate external explanation, several high-level officials broke their brains. However, this external explanation was secondary. What was important was that this time the sect was not only destroyed, but the disciples in the sect were also seriously injured. More disciples were still lying around injured. If they are not rescued in time, the sect could maybe lose more. Within 100 miles there was no need to carry out treatment, except for a few big shots, there were no more living beings left. Afterwards, the surviving Jitan realm disciples had started to receive treatment. Furthermore, people had begun to get spontaneously rescued. Several of the big shots appeared and everyone's panic calmed. There were several Daching realm elders who had been in seclusion and almost never appeared. It also brought calmness to the Greatest Heaven sect. Regardless of the big wind and rain, if these ancestors were okay, then the Greatest Heaven sect could remain safe and sound. The Greatest Heaven sect was like a conglomerate family. Due to the large scale of the explosion radiating from the original Mountain Gate hospitality to hundreds of miles outside, even the square was directly destroyed. At least thousands of innocent rogue cultivators and other martial art disciples in the city were also affected. For the Greatest Heaven sect, this explosion was simply a terrible terrorist attack. When several elders settled the fears of the disciples in the sect, they were scheduled to start to save the wounded and dying. A day had already passed. The preparation of statistics and operations regarding the saved people lasted for a whole month. The result of counting statistics made a few high-level members of the Greatest Heaven sect directly spit out blood. Because the explosion had occurred at the reception area of the sect, the original Mountain Gate, not far, there was the residence of the outer sect disciples. Going further was the residences of the inner sect disciples. Within 500 miles of the explosion, the whole army of disciples and slaves below the foundation stage did not leave a mouthful of breathable light. This number had already reached tens of thousands. Although the figures were large, they were all below the foundation stage, which did not seem to have much impact on the strength of the Greatest Heaven sect. However, this meant that the backup force of the sect had been completely annihilated. Fortunately, the Greatest Heaven sect lost tens of thousands of disciples with qualifications for practicing overnight. For at least 100 years, the Greatest Heaven sect would not be able to accept it. Disciples who had been under the foundation realm had also suffered a lot of casualties. After the statistical count, the casualties of disciples in the foundation realm numbered more than 2,000. This figure, although not a big number for a big sect like the Greatest Heaven sect, it was still close to more than a quarter of all the foundation realm disciples of the Puryang Palace. In perspective of Puryang Palace, such loss would definitely be devastating. Strictly speaking, the strength of the Greatest Heaven sect was not based on the disciples of the foundation realm, but the masters above the Jitan realm. In the ordinary times, within the gates of the sect, there would be no masters other than the masters of the Dacheng realm. The problem was that to ensure that the welcoming array and formation would not be affected by mistakes, several of the big shots were sent out together. 4 Yuning realm ancestors had been sent with 20 Jitan masters each to take care of alerting surrounding areas. Even if it was the Yuning realm ancestors, under the protection of several masters of the Dacheng realm, the distance was still not very much, it was impossible to resist the power of the explosion. At that time, the 4 Yuning ancestors and 80 Jitan realm masters directly turned into ash. Take the Puryang Palace as an example. The 4 Yuning ancestors were already half of the Yuning ancestors in the sect. The 80 Jitan realm masters were at least 1/5 of their amount. At this time, these served as half the power of Puryang Palace. Even the Greatest Heaven sect was distressed over their lose. When was a Yuning realm ancestor so easy to cultivate? Their loss numbered 4, which was not counting the 80 Jitan realm masters. Who could be assigned responsibility on this occasion, which one was not the core disciple of the sect's absolute trust? All of them were folded in at once. This was only the loss of personnel. The number of destroyed houses was not less than 100,000, even the foundation of the mountain protecting Great Formation had been destroyed by more than half. When the loss of these properties was so devastating for the Greatest Heaven sect, then the loss of some ancient books would make them even more painful. The branch housing the jade slips of basic knowledge related to alchemy for the quasi-outer and outer disciples was destroyed with the explosion. Even a hidden pavilion of scriptures for inner disciples was destroyed with all the jade slips. Although the ruin was only a few low-level cultivation methods and various basic knowledge, those methods could still be rewritten by memory. But not everyone had the abnormal memory like Yang Chen's, which could also restore some of the cultivation and miscellaneous other books that were referenced in the past. And there were some cultivation methods, obviously no one had practiced, which meant that they were lost for good. Less than half of Greatest Heaven sect's basic cultivation methods remained. These were painstakingly collected from various places in various ways by the disciples of the sect. Still most had been destroyed. The inheritance of the foundation directly lost more than half of its total knowledge. Even if the Greatest Heaven sect started recruiting outer sect disciples, due to the loss of the many disciples and ancient books, they had to extract some from the servants who had not been damaged to cultivate them. How could they let the inner sect disciples of the foundation realm to take over the outer sect disciples? Even without inheritance, the new outer sect disciples may even face the embarrassment of having to do some chores themselves because there were not enough slaves to help them. However, even if all these issues were resolved, the Greatest Heaven sect still must face another problem. Because of this explosion, almost all the outer sect disciples were killed. Would anyone now dare to join the Greatest Heaven sect, a martial arts sect that could not protect their own outer sect disciples? Despite the strength of the Greatest Heaven sect, it was still the leader among the first-class sects. These losses had not yet calculated another issue, the reputation of the greatest heaven sect. When the Pure Yang Palace gate was destroyed, it was almost immediately pulled up by the means of thunder and thousand miles. The reputation was not reduced, but it was even more prosperous. What kind of means does the greatest heaven sect need to use now to save their lost reputation? Such a huge loss, even if it was a sect as strong as the greatest heaven sect, it would definitely hurt. During the statistical process of this period, several senior executives faced the reports of losses accumulated every day. They could only use a metaphor to describe their feelings, and that was that they wanted to cry, but couldn't find any tears. In the high-level collective of the greatest heaven sect, the hatred of the perpetrator who broke the consciousness clone had reached its maximum. The news that the greatest heaven sect's gate was destroyed by a crazy explosion had spread throughout the world of cultivation. If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more. Chapter 283. Drinking and Celebration. Although the active consciousness of the avatar was killed, the remaining avatars did not dissipate, and instinctive consciousness remained. However, this had no threat to Yang Chen. In his sea of consciousness, such a strong consciousness of the Daching realm was simply an excellent supplement. The control of the 5 females and their respective 1/6 part of the active consciousness could make the 5 women directly promote a small realm stage. Not to mention that Yang Chen personally refined the remaining 1/6 of the active consciousness in his mind, plus all instinct awareness. The spiritual awareness grew like a crazy growth hormone. The benefits of this kind of doorstep delivery were not meager. Yang Chen had now reached the realm of Jiten. There were no worries about his spiritual consciousness splitting for a long time. The avatar consciousness of this immortal world Great Principle Golden Immortal was soon under the formidable 3 purities secret art, completely reduced to nothingness. The original spiritual awareness of Yang Chen was highly concise, however, the avatar consciousness was from a Great Principle Golden Immortal. From the peak of Yuning realm, it broke through to the early stage of the Daching realm and continued till the early apex of the Daching realm. Only then did the growth of the spiritual awareness stopped. The sea of consciousness narrowed to 150 mu, the sea of consciousness had once again expanded and returned to the size of 200 acres. Whether it was the 5th earth layer or the Penglai divine wood or the Naitu bridge or the yin-yang burning heavenly fire dragon, they all increased in proportion and became sturdier. Within the Daching realm, Yang Chen could almost control all the magic weapons on his body, including the golden bell, the jasper cup and the shuttle. This refining took a whole month for Yang Chen. When he finished it, he drove the shuttle and immediately discovered that the speed of the shuttle had increased by 50%. When Luo Yuan was chasing Yang Chen at that time, and if the shuttle had such speed, he could even stop and rest for 1 or 2 hours every day, waiting for Luo Yuan to catch up slowly, otherwise Luo Yuan would have lost him. He leisurely rushed back to the Pure Yang Palace. As the first thing Yang Chen went to the sect warehouse, meeting the elder Zheng Feng and returning the materials he had borrowed before. Yang Chen's borrowed things still needed to be returned, but Elder Zheng Feng didn't really care about them. However, on Yang Chen's insistence, Elder Zheng Feng could not refuse and opened the door to let Yang Chen put the things on his own. Zheng Feng laughed and helped Yang Chen to collect the materials. He then directly took Yang Chen straight to the Pure Yang Palace main hall. Ah ha ha ha. When they had not arrived, he could hear the unscrupulous laughter of the master of the palace, as if there was a great event going on in the Pure Yang Palace. Yang Chen certainly knew why the master of the palace would laugh. For so long, even if the greatest heaven sect blocked the news, it should still have been passed over. However, he still quietly followed Elder Zheng Feng into the hall. Among the halls, it seemed that apart from Wang Yang, who was retreating, several elders were all in the same place. Di Shanyu of the Hall of Eccentrics was also there, as if they were waiting for Yang Chen. Looking at this posture, Yang Chen naturally understood what it meant. The greatest heaven sect also has today. Several restrictions were placed, and the palace master screamed the first sentence and laughed again. Yang Chen, you came back. There were restrictions, and several elders were unscrupulous. Gao Xian was simply happy to inform Yang Chen, today, I received a message that the greatest heaven sect was attacked. The outer sect faced destruction, tens of thousands of disciples' servants lost their lives, including 4 Yuaning realm masters and 80 Jiten masters. The mountain gate got half ruined, and we are excited. Originally this was a high-level meeting of the Pure Yang Palace, still Yang Chen presence didn't raise any red flags. This was the default of several elders and the master of the palace. From now on, Yang Chen would be used as an heir. It was so ruthless. Yang Chen knew that his work would have definitely caused a chain reaction at the greatest heaven sect, but he did not expect that there would be such brilliant results. This time he was also overjoyed. The most basic goal of Yang Chen was to completely foil the descent of the consciousness clone and to cut off the channels of the greatest heaven sect with the immortal world. The second was to destroy the greatest heaven sect plans. He didn't have much expectations, but he got such an impressive result. How could it not let Yang Chen rejoice? There are many tigers in the mountains. Zhu Chentao said with a happy smile, the greatest heaven sect has been overbearing for so long, and they always offend people who should not be offended. Under them, my and others' sects' gates were completely destroyed. Finally, theirs has also suffered the same fate. Someone has revenged for us. The palace master and the elders were simply celebrating happily. This secret celebration was the same as in other Tao sects. However, in their capacity, they couldn't make such performances publicly. They could only hide and do them secretly. In public, they must show serious support for the greatest heaven sect. Otherwise it was easy for people in the greatest heaven sect to guess that they already knew the truth of Liang Shaming. Even now, the pure Yang palace still could not bear the cost of dealing with the greatest heaven sect. Some advantages could still not be taken. This was the sorrow of the weak. When strength was insufficient, even when facing the enemy, one could only bear the torment. But in any case, their happiness was certain, the big shots and Yang Chen were concealed. Yang Chen took out the jade dragon wine and celebrated with it in the hall of the pure Yang palace. It was rare to meet this kind of matter worthy of celebration. Everyone even put down their haughty manner that was high on ordinary days and let go of it. After enjoying a lot of jade dragon wine, they were amazed and drunk. Soon they disbanded and returned. Within the halls, only the master of the palace and Yang Chen were left behind. When Elder Zheng Feng was drinking and was about to leave, Yang Chen took the chance to help him and supported him along. After a while, he returned to the hall. Even with a few restrictions, the master of the palace felt that it was not secure enough for discussions with Yang Chen. He directly brought him to his own medicine garden. Then he asked, Yang Chen, what is it? He did not know where the master of the palace was hiding Wan Qian, he did not see her when he came in. Of course, Yang Chen and Zheng Feng would not be rude to open their spiritual awareness to explore in the site which belonged to the palace master. When listening to the master of the palace, Yang Chen said, Palace master, Elder Zheng, the disciple wanted to ask the elders to hold the auction soon. Refine the materials again which this disciple had borrowed before. Sell them as soon as possible. Why? Elder Zheng Feng asked awkwardly, still not realizing the hidden message inside. The palace master was gazing at him. He seems to have thought of something. He didn't change his expression mouth and affirmed, since you say so, then we will do it. Junior brother Zheng, I will have to trouble you for this hard task, refine those materials. Take the batch out as soon as possible and send it straight to sell it. I will do it. Elder Zheng Feng got up, nodded and started to act without any objections. The Pure Yang Palace was now united, especially the top level. It was completely harmonious, there was no more competition for power. People who followed the path of cultivation, once they found out that they have achieved Daching realm success or even hope for reaching the day when they could ascend, who cared about the power of the world? Everyone at the sect had a questioning inner heart pill. Everyone had seen the pursuit. Even if the power of the sect was piled up, the elders feel that they were wasting time obstructing their own practice. Who would take the initiative to take such a matter? If there were not some matters that ultimately were under their responsibility, they may have even wanted to quit their position as elders and concentrate on their cultivation. Wait. Elder Zheng Feng was about to leave, but was told to wait by the palace master. Elder Zheng Feng hurriedly turned back and looked at the master of the palace, waiting for his command. Don't let go of it. The master of the palace thought for a moment, once again said, let the Jitan disciples who are good at refining the equipment work hard on it. Use these materials to create a batch of flying sword embryos. Let Gao Yu change their shape slightly and give them to the disciples who would perform well in the near future. Keep the recorded date of refining 20 years ahead of schedule. No matter who asks, tell them that sect disciple Gao Yu closed up for 30 years and had been refining this batch of flying swords. Although he didn't know what had happened to Yang Chen, but Yang Chen was anxious to take this batch of things out, certainly for some reason. Due to some fear that others would find this batch of materials. The master of the palace also knew that Yang Chen took away a batch of high-level materials and simply did not want to let go of them. He wanted to use them to help his own sect's disciples and in turn help Gao Yu. He believed that with the relationship between Yang Chen and Gao Yu would definitely recognize it. The sword embryos created by these advanced materials were also enough to become the life source flying swords of some disciples. Of course, although the sword embryo was good, it still required everyone's own efforts. Originally, this level of material was not so easy to release. In case of a problem, they would simply conceal the complete group of faithful disciples and cover up the whereabouts of the materials. Even if someone investigates, there would be no trace. Elder Zheng Feng looked at the palace master and then looked at Yang Chen again. His face flashed a trace of doubts. His eyes stayed on Yang Chen's face and seemed to be waiting for him to reply. Facing the eyes of Elder Zheng Feng, Yang Chen nodded his head and seemed to admit what he had done. Elder Zheng Feng laughed twice. Then he said loudly, I will arrange it this time. I don't need other people to do this. We're a few old guys and there's nothing wrong with it. Sending Elder Zheng Feng away. The master of the palace and with a wave of his main hand, arranged a table and 2 chairs in the medicine garden. As Yang Chen wanted to explain, the palace master shook his hand and stopped him, wait, take out your jade dragon wine and say it while we drink it. Wan Qian, who knew where she was hiding in the palace, appeared near the table, her hands were mysteriously carrying 2 dishes that looked delicious. It seemed that the taste of the palace master and Yang Chen was the same, they both liked to use the medicines produced in the medicine garden as delicacies. In Wan Qian's well-behaved service, the palace master and Yang Chen sat on one side. After drinking a cup, the palace master said, let's talk. Yang Chen then described his work in this way, of course, he did not know in detail about the time when the other side started the operation. He just said that he accidentally discovered the array at the gate of the Greatest Heaven sect and found out what it does in a book. There were 2 similar arrays that could trigger the same frequency oscillations, which could not be controlled by the spiritual power and eventually lead to an explosion. The palace master heard Yang Chen admitting that he had arranged another similar formation and then used the spiritual power to smash the Greatest Heaven sect's formation, which eventually caused the huge loss and heavy casualties of the Greatest Heaven sect. After hearing such, it was necessary for him to non-stop drink the delicious jade dragon wine and let go of the waves. The dignified and steady master of the palace today acted like a different person. It was Yang Chen who discovered the conspiracy of the Greatest Heaven sect. Now he had reported to the sect that the mountain gate had been destroyed. It was still only Yang Chen, but he still did it so beautifully. The palace master was so happy that he didn't know how to express it. Knowing that the sect accepting Yang Chen was definitely the most correct matter he has ever encountered in this life. The only pity was that the master of the palace could only share this happiness with Yang Chen and couldn't even talk to the other elders. Even if Elder Zheng Feng had vaguely guessed something. Yang Chen had just silently nodded and hadn't admitted anything concrete. The matter was too great. It was not an exaggeration to describe it as a hole in the sky. Once it got caught by the Greatest Heaven sect, not to say anything about the strength of the pure Yang Palace, complete sect destruction would be the only result. Therefore, whether it was Yang Chen or the master of the palace, they were very cautious. However, such a happy matter could only be stuffed in their stomachs, even the palace master was somewhat aggrieved. But the joyful mood would never change because of this little regret. It was extremely satisfying to see the successor that he had chosen. He was competent, not arrogant, loyal to the sect, repeatedly made surprises, never had a disciple, the master of the palace was very satisfied. For Yang Chen, he was content with his satisfaction. Yang Chen accompanied the master of the palace to drink the wine for almost a full day. The palace master was happy, wasn't Yang Chen not happy? This time, almost half of the inheritance of the Greatest Heaven sect was eliminated, the pace of the Greatest Heaven sect's expansion had been made to slow down for hundreds of years. All of this was a gift outside of his main purpose. How could it not let Yang Chen be happy and excited? Even if the Greatest Heaven sect was a big sect with a lot of assets, they couldn't suffer this kind of blow again and again. Yang Chen was now just like the little ant who had smashed the embankment of 1,000 miles and was busy hollowing out the Greatest Heaven sect little by little. His revenge was now a step closer. He just didn't know if this time, his former enemy, Yang Lan, had been directly killed or not. In the subconscious, Yang Chen did not want this kind of end for him. Yang Chen's life and death enemy, the person who made his life unfortunate and caused his master's death, it was definitely a cheaper way to end him. Yang Chen still thought that one day, he would cut his head with his own hands. When they were slightly drunk from the wine, Yang Chen began to start worrying about how to take the benefits of the secret land in his hands and while also concealing his part and the Pure Yang Palace's involvement. If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more. Chapter 284. The Greatest Heaven Sect going berserk. The secret land was very dangerous, no doubt about it. Even in his previous life, with the power of the Greatest Heaven Sect, they still lost much manpower there. If the Pure Yang Palace wanted to swallow this secret land, he was afraid that it would never pay less than the price of what Greatest Heaven Sect paid. Another point was that the intelligence report of this secret land was acquired from a rogue cultivator in the immortal world. Although this time, the Greatest Heaven Sect was not able to possess it, but who could guarantee that the next time when another consciousness clone descended, they would not be informed about it. At that time, the sector individual who had gone to the secret plane would definitely be the object of their vehement violent revenge. Speaking of it, this secret plane was really dangerous. Compared with the abundant resources inside, the safety of the sect and its disciples was more important. However, to let Yang Chen give up the wealth of this secret land to the greatest heaven sect, such expectation was absolutely impossible. Since he couldn't take it himself, he wouldn't let the greatest heaven sect to get the benefit either. If several large sects were involved, maybe the Pure Yang Palace could still get a piece of it. And as for the explanation for the palace master, Yang Chen couldn't explain where he got the news, as it would definitely cause suspicion. In his heart, he made up his mind, and Yang Chen didn't have any burden, and he was able to enjoy the Jade Dragon wine with the enjoyment of the palace master. Today's master of the palace was very high-spirited. It may be the first indulgence after he was promoted to Yuning ancestors. He turned out to be drunk and unconscious, and even forgot to put Yang Chen out of the medicine garden. The Pure Yang Palace was celebrating happily, but there was raging anger on the greatest heaven sect side. The dashing realm elder who rushed out to find the spiritual fluctuations similar to their welcoming array had returned, bringing back a message that made the greatest heaven sect's upper echelon shocked. The place to develop the layout of the formation had been found. In fact, it was such large in scope that it was impossible to cover it completely, its detection was inevitable. However, the discovery only found a trace of the explosion, any other spiritual powers did not even leave a smell. When he arrived, because of the unusual spiritual power, many heavy rains were ongoing. It was impossible to find any other clue other than the site of the explosion. In the inaccessible area, there were remnants of many other explosions spread over hundreds of miles. However, clues of an explosion bursting from the center were evident, and like that of their large array, which explained much. What was dazzling was that such a large scope did not leave a significant clue of its existence or trace of the perpetrator. Even the rubble from the explosion was cleaned up for investigation. Though tracing in this way was simply a joke. The only certainty was that some people had arranged the same kind of array as their welcoming array and then detonated the formation, leading to the instability of the greatest heaven sect's consciousness once again and in turn leading to the disaster. All the high-ranking members of the greatest heaven sect were like red-eyed bulls that had been slapped on their faces, all looked like murderers. Tens of thousands of servants' life, they had to catch the murderer, they had to pay them for this slap in the face. In fact, all the younger brothers of Jitan realm and above in the greatest heaven sect had all been sent out to look for any possible clues. The top level had already issued the pattern of the array and the materials used. Any master of the array who had touched these materials would become a suspect. The anger of the greatest heaven sect was the joy of many sects. Even though the greatest heaven sect was in a high position in the cultivation world, many would be happy in their misfortunes. All the sects were similarly in high spirits like the Pure Yang Palace, secretly celebrating and drinking. Their happiness even brought advances in their cultivation and refining. The happy and open mind was always beneficial. As for certain demon sect disciples and monster cultivators, they openly celebrated. Everyone was already at life and death hostility. Some people gave them such a prize, it was not too late to celebrate. The arrogance of the greatest heaven sect in these years had indeed made many people dissatisfied. Due to the strength disparity in face of the greatest heaven sect that no one had retaliated yet. Even the attitudes of several other large-scale sects were the same. It could be seen how much unpopular the greatest heaven sect had become to people in these years. The first object of doubt in the greatest heaven sect was the several large gates that were almost identical to them. Everyone was competing to return to the position of the leader of the Tao sect and sometimes would work behind the scenes. The previous Desolate Valley 5-element sect was one of them. However, currently, the greatest heaven sect, whose strength was greatly damaged, could not bear the consequences of being an enemy with several major sects. Despite doubts, they did not dare to show it. The second object of doubt was certain large demon sects and some extremely powerful monster cultivator alliances. It was only normal that they were the life and death enemies that the greatest heaven sect had been in conflict with since a long time. It was normal for them to do such a thing. At the third level, there were some rogue cultivator alliances. Tao sects governed by the greatest heaven sect were the most prosperous areas on the land. These rogue cultivators could only be forcefully evicted overseas. Although sometimes there was no opportunity for spiritual power progress overseas, consequently they had to compete with some powerful guys for it. For the greatest heaven sect, if they said that they did not hate it would be fake. The greatest heaven sect just had an accident, they were looking forward to dispelling this anger on others. The last doubt was the smaller sects in the cultivation world. Among them, the most suspicious was the Pure Yang Palace, which was relatively large. A few decades ago, the gates of Pure Yang Palace were destroyed. Though there was no loss of people. Who knew whether it was the Pure Yang Palace exacting revenge? However, the greatest heaven sect executives were still not sure about this. Whether the Pure Yang Palace knew of their complicity was doubtful. After all, the Pure Yang Palace had claimed the 100,000 mountains for many years. Anger from that disaster had already been swept under the rug due to the 100,000 mountains matter. At the same time, their attitude towards the Greatest Heaven sect had not changed from beginning to end, so the seniors of the Greatest Heaven sect were doubtful. As for other small sects and rogue cultivators, they were the most unquestionable. Of course, this did not mean that all of them were unsuspected. Anyone who had a reputation for formation research was a suspect. The people in the Greatest Heaven sect had almost gone insane to check each cultivator. It caused havoc and panic among the cultivators. Someone raised an objection, feeling their attitude being too much. The next day, people from the sect went and cut his head off. Since then, no one dared to say anything. They let the Greatest Heaven sect act as they pleased. Of course, these were rogue cultivators. Towards the real cultivation world giants, the Greatest Heaven sect would not dare to use such an attitude. It was just such a big matter. If they got cornered by several large sects at this time, they would not be able to bear the consequences. The welcoming array had always been the core secret of the martial arts sects. It could hardly be said that it was impossible to get to know about it other than for the palace master and a few core elders. To think that on the side of the Greatest Heaven sect, a similar welcoming array was arranged. Was it that these core elders have betrayed the sect? The palace master was a smart person, and there was no such doubt. Almost all these elders were masters of the Daching realm and were all deep in seclusion. Basically, they had not participated in worldly affairs. They were so eager to ascend that they would not participate in this kind of matter. Thus, everything was like a mire making them puzzled. Could it be that the other party had not arranged a welcoming array, but some other formation which resonated with the welcoming array and caused it to explode? Reminiscent of the inexplicable semicircular black hole above the welcoming array, everyone kept on guessing. It was beyond the control of everyone for being confused. Even Yang Chen did not know the effect of arranging two similar welcoming arrays at the same time. He just tried it hoping for success, and success he achieved in one fell swoop at that. And the understanding of the array by people in the Greatest Heaven sect did not necessarily achieve even half of what Yang Chen had arranged. How could they figure out such a core problem? But the suspicion was still going on. The Greatest Heaven sect was like a mad dog, attacking everywhere. Their bloody eyes stared at all the suspects. At even the slightest possibility, they would definitely rush to kill the other. The Greatest Heaven sect was really anxious. For the longest time, they could not exact revenge or even find a single clue about the perpetrator. In the same year, Pyongyang Palace had suffered similar destruction, but it also nabbed 100,000 people in the mountains. And 1 month after, when everyone was still talking about it, they had directly brought people to the old nest of the 100,000 mountains. Even if one rushed from the Pyongyang Palace to the 100,000 mountains, the road would take almost a month. To say that the Pyongyang Palace was not prepared was nonsense. The Greatest Heaven sect knew that for the 100,000 mountains, the Pyongyang Palace had been preparing for at least a few years. However, even the small Pyongyang Palace was able to immediately find a target to vent its pent-up rage. Even took advantage from the highly prosperous 100,000 mountains. In comparison, the Greatest Heaven sect didn't even know the opponent. How would they not choke on their rage? After more than a month, there were still no clues. Instead, many people had once again had a change of view about the Greatest Heaven sect. It was only because of the special circumstances at this time, everyone dared not to anger them, but in the back, they would cheer and clap, wishing that the Greatest Heaven sect experience a few more explosions. However, after all, the Greatest Heaven sect was still the Greatest Heaven sect. Soon, dozens of small martial arts sect groups united to deny this kind of destructive behavior against the Greatest Heaven sect. At the same time, these dozens of small sects discussed and collectively invested in the Greatest Heaven sect, becoming one and the same. Not only these dozens of small sects, but even a few rogue cultivator alliances also voted over and joined the Greatest Heaven sect. Despite the disaster making the reserve disciples suffer heavy casualties with the addition of so many new martial arts sects, they recovered some of their strength in just a few dozen days. These joining forces were not as strong as those of the Greatest Heaven sect's reserve forces. The addition of foreigner disciples and slaves had alleviated the urgent needs of the Greatest Heaven sect. There was no need to worry about successors in a short time. The dilemma that could not be cultivated by disciples. The discerning eye almost immediately knew that why these dozens of small sects had supported the Greatest Heaven sect. They were clearly pawns on a chessboard that had been inserted in by the Greatest Heaven sect. They had been helping them to do things that were too inconvenient for themselves. This was a difficult time for the sect. Naturally they would return immediately to strengthen their prestige. This kind of action, although several big sects had done it before, none of them were as powerful as the Greatest Heaven sect. Dozens of small martial arts sects plus 2 small rogue cultivator alliances, each of which looks less eye-catching at most, had a Yuning realm ancestor as their head, but the combined strength was significant. Nothing worse than Pyongyang Palace at the least. The most speechless matter was that this was still part of the concealed power of the Greatest Heaven sect. Who knew how much power the Greatest Heaven sect had in their control? This move alerted many sects. What was the plan of Greatest Heaven sect? Secretly arranging so many pieces, many of them were even around the other major sects, making their intentions almost clear. Fortunately, this time's disaster had made the Greatest Heaven sect expose these hidden pieces to stabilize the moral of the sect. If it had been going on like this for a long time, maybe these would become the culprits of disasters in other sects. The explosion was good. For the arrangement of the Greatest Heaven sect, countless people had once again issued such a voice and began to intentionally or unintentionally set up a variety of obstructions in the investigation of the Greatest Heaven sect. When the Greatest Heaven sect started investigating about certain materials, Elder Zhang Feng immediately determined everything. While his heart was dark, he still urged several old elders in the Yuning realm to quickly refine Yang Chen's materials. With the help of the newly added 8-member Yuning realm monsters in Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave, this matter was handled quickly. It took only some short 5 days. All the materials were then handed to Gao Yu. Gao Yu was currently consolidating her realm. The water-attributed cultivation base had achieved almost the same level as the fire-attributed cultivation base. Yang Chen also suggested her when she was leaving for secluded cultivation, if the coordination remained good, these two properties could definitely bring opponents unexpected disasters. What is this? Seeing a lot of good sword embryos sent by Elder Zhang Feng, Gao Yu could not help but be surprised. Let Yang Chen explain it to you. Elder Zhang Feng put things down, left a sentence and left. Yang Chen was on the side of Gao Yu. It was easy to come back once, of course, to accompany his master. It's not that he had to do anything with master's knowledge, but here at Gao Yu's side, Yang Chen could relax and enjoy the warmth and temptation. Since the Elder Zhang Feng said this, Yang Chen certainly couldn't explain it all. After thinking about it, Yang Chen decided to use the words of the palace master to convince Gao Yu. The Greatest Heaven sect was facing a disaster and Yang Chen was the reason for all of this. Gao Yu couldn't believe her ears. Once such a thing leaks out, not only Yang Chen, but also the entire Pure Yang Palace would face a great disaster. How do you deal with these sword embryos? After listening to Yang Chen's description, Gao Yu said nothing about picking up a sword embryo and then asked. Since these things were hidden dangers but could also be used to fight for life and to cover up Yang Chen's matter. If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more. Chapter 285. The Future Talents in Memory. Gao Yu was busy all the time and Yang Chen was idle again. At this time, he finally began to consider the words of the palace master at the time they drank. Since you are already a Jitan realm master, consider taking a few talented apprentices. This was the original words of the palace master. The rules of the Pure Yang Palace were that an apprentice could only be accepted by a master of the Jitan realm. Of course, this refers to the Inner Mountain disciples. In fact, most of the martial arts sects had such rules, otherwise it would not make a Jitan expert, a master. The words of the palace master were very exciting for Yang Chen's memory. Since it was not possible to move the idea of the secret land or plan for it for a while, he really could take a few apprentices to cultivate. One must know that at the Immortal Executioner Stage, Yang Chen also promised a lot of people. Many had met the right disciples and wanted them to inherit their schools. These were some of the conditions that Yang Chen agreed to in exchange for their information. Since he already had the qualifications to accept an apprentice, Yang Chen wanted to accept some to fulfill the conditions he had promised. However, Yang Chen was not just accepting anyone, he still must consider some. If their qualifications were mediocre and they were Pure Yang Palace's disciples and they were willing, he could give pointers and will spare no effort to cultivate them, but he will not accept them as disciples. Now that this was his second life, Yang Chen knew of the future talented disciples. Zhanxian and Sun Qingxu, he could not do anything about them, but he had to establish an unbreakable relationship with them. As for the younger generations who were famous in the world, he was naturally impolite and must get them to be on his side. Zhenmo. Male, previous life overseas rogue cultivator, earth attributed. A free soul and unconventional cultivator, no one dared to offend him before his ascension to the immortal world. Yu. Male, previous life child of limitless demon sect master, metal attributed. Practiced the limitless demonic art, unrestrictedly laughed at the arrogant demon realm. Yu. Female, previous life water moon house disciple, water attributed. A starry magic weapon which completely compassed of numerous fine needles, was a woman no one dared to be disrespectful to in the demon realm. Hua Menju. Female, previous life green jade immortal island disciple, wood attributed. When it came to combat effectiveness, perhaps Hua Menju was not the strongest, but she could grow plants. No matter how difficult it was to plant, if it was handed over to Hua Menju, it could be successfully planted. The method of planting thunder pomegranate was her credit. Only this one ability would make countless people to rush to her. Yu Bai. Male, previous life greatest heaven sect disciple, sword cultivator, wooden attributed. He was monster race, a morning cypress tree which transformed into a spirit. Later became greatest heaven sect, hall of eccentrics, hall master. The nether dragon sword that was refined with his own heart swept the monster realm. Although he was a disciple of the greatest heaven sect, he concentrated on cultivation and ignored foreign affairs. He never had any contact with Yang Chen. Bing Kong. Male, previous life cold crystal cave disciple, mechanical master, water attributed. His silver star composed of six-handed ice crystal flying swords was unmatched. He was also an outstanding mechanical master, the puppets he produced were simply the treasures that all cultivators dreamed of. Yu Fan. Male, previous life overseas rogue cultivator, earth and gold dual attributes. What he was best at was the myriad sword secret art, which had the same skill as Yang Chen's 10,000 swords returned to origin. His divine sword in his hand, he swept away everything. Sanan. Male, previous life divine profound sect disciple, Kilin bloodline, Kilin left arm, fire attributed. The talents were different, ingenious, and the left arm was tempered into a magic weapon that was invincible. After joining the Heavenly Court army, although he was only a small celestial soldier, the leader Zhanxian did not dare to be even slightly scornful. Mo Chunmei. Female, previous life blue cloud sect disciple, fire attributed. After hundreds of years of Sun Kingsu, another outstanding disciple came. From the mortal world to the heavenly court, the Blue Cloud sect had been able to stand up against Profound Heaven sect's greatest heaven sect, and it was all because of the powerful Sun Kingsu and Mo Chunmei. Defying. Male, previous life Kunlun Mountains rogue cultivator, fire attributed refining master. At the immortal world, even if the firepower ability of Yang Chen was at full strength, it still could not be compared to Defying. With only this one can judge the strength of Defying. As a master of refining instruments, his magic weapon was incomparable. He was known as the first refiner to be the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. So many talented little cultivators would appear in the next millennium. At this time, if Yang Chen did not take the time to receive them one by one, would it not be a pity that he was so lucky to be reborn? Yes, there was also the old demon Yi, although in the past life old demon Yi and Yang Chen perished together, but that demonic heart was the root of Yang Chen's life. Speaking of it, it was a gift of merit. Since Yang Chen of this life had already stood at the top position of this time, naturally he will not forget to fulfill the old demon Yi's debt. The merits of passing on the merits were still rewarded with grace. Nothing was better than cultivating old demon Yi as a disciple, wasn't that a better way of repaying his debts? All these people, except old demon Yi and Hua Menju, had almost all kinds of spiritual roots or postnatal values, their qualifications of cultivation were better than Shai Shanshan, Sun Kingsu, Gao Yugong and Sun Ling. Yang Chen, in his heart had already booked them as his own disciples. He believed that if these people were taken under his apprenticeship, it would be impossible for Pure Yang Palace to decline. And if one could become the master of these superb seedlings, the possibilities could be endless. After another 300 years, Yu Bai, the Cypress, would join the greatest heaven sect. Slowly then promote to become the hall master of the Hall of Eccentrics. In the past life, the greatest heaven sect was the first to come up with a hall of eccentrics, only then other sects made the rules to allow the monster race to join in. Joining the hall of eccentrics required at least the strength of the Yuning realm. At this time, Yu Bai should at most be at the Jitan realm. It was necessary to receive this extremely enchanting candidate in advance before the greatest heaven sect had the chance. Receiving Yu Bai not only enhanced the strength of the Pure Yang Palace, but also weakened the power of the future greatest heaven sect. The good deed of this killing two birds with one stone, what more would one want? What made Yang Chen somewhat speechless was that when this Yu Bai gave himself a name, it was at the same level as Shi Kui and Xia Sha. It was clearly that the name of his own body was reversed, it was quite irresponsible. Fortunately, in the previous life, Yu Bai was strong and famous enough, so Yang Chen still remembered where he was. Not to say, the current timing was also opportune, why not get this powerful guy under his tutelage? As for how to direct a monster cultivator, Yang Chen had a secret cultivation manual, even the old tree demon had not obtained from Yang Chen. For the time being, he needed to observe how reliable they were. Only after they do conform to his standards will he accept them. Hua Menju. The Dream of Flowers. Bing Kong. Ice. Yu Bai. The Cypress. After confirming his target candidates, Yang Chen discovered that to take these small monstrous talents under his belt one by one would take a long time. These were the strong persons who emerged after his ascension in his past lives, he didn't know whether he could find them all before he would ascend. However, even if he were to ascend, he must arrange for the Pure Yang Palace to collect these people. The body of Yu Bai was in a wild land far north of the Central Plains, which was ruled by the Orthodox X. The land there was barren, the climate was relatively dry and bitter cold. According to reason, it was not suitable for plants to survive. However, Mu Bai's main body grew there. This kind of harsh environment was also an important reason for Mu Bai to be similarly monstrously talented. The more one struggles in a tough environment, the more perseverance one has, and the more you can face all kinds of calamities. Just like Sun Qingxu of the past life, who was excluded from the martial arts sects and cultivated on her own, became one of the most talented cultivators of a generation. The same applied to Mu Bai. Just on the way to find the body of Mu Bai, Yang Chen could still accomplish the matter of gathering the first wood true essence. On the Immortal Executioner Stage, there was an immortal to be slain, who said that there was a vein of first wood true essence in the lower realm in his immortal's cave, and Yang Chen certainly would not skip it. Now Yang Chen was currently only a third and fourth fire double attributed Jitan realm cultivator. The other 8 spiritual powers were still at the peak of the late foundation stage. According to Yang Chen's past practice experience, if he collected the first wood true essence for the cultivation of the first wood true secret art, he could at least ensure that first wood spirit power could also succeed to Jitan realm. He didn't know if first wood spirit power of Jitan stage could initiate other attributed spirit powers at the same Jitan stage, but at least Yang Chen's great yin and yang 5-element secret art would get more perfected. In the same way, it would certainly lead to the process of other attributes spirit powers getting Jitan stage advancements. Just the Jitan stage, it takes at least 10 years to consolidate. At that time, Yang Chen's master Gaoyu took only 10 years after he condensed it. The first one that received Yang Chen. Now, although Yang Chen said that the palace master had long recognized that he had the qualifications for admission, he must pluck his own yin and yang 5-element secret art, which was the right way to practice. It was just that the sword embryo of first wood flying sword had been completed. He believed that with the understandings of the first wood true essence, the first wood flying sword among the yin-yang 5 elements flying swords would soon become Yang Chen's other ultimate flying sword. Master ancestor Wang Yong was still in seclusion, and his senior sister, Gong Sunling, was still following her master to study several sub-levels of the formations. Over the past years, some of the absolutely trusted of the disciples had been able to enter the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave to cultivate. Yang Chen just hurriedly greeted Gong Sunling and left the Pure Yang Palace without saying anything more. Since before the palace master, Yang Chen had casually taken out the bodies of 15 praying mantises and Wan Qian, who were all Yuanying realm ancestors, he never said anything about the safety of Yang Chen again. Even Luo Yuan could do nothing about Yang Chen. In this world, the people who could hurt Yang Chen were really too few. Perhaps apart from the supermasters who were about to ascend, few people could threaten the safety of Yang Chen. However, since they were all facing ascension, how could they easily embarrass themselves by catching a Jitan realm junior? No one knew what Yang Chen was going to do, and no one was going to control it either. These years, Yang Chen's work had proved to the high-level members of the Pure Yang Palace that they should let Yang Chen do whatever he wished. They only needed to be responsible for solving some minor troubles afterwards. Yang Chen was definitely working towards Pure Yang Palace's benefit. Amid the secret plane issue, Yang Chen still intended to endure for a few years and seduce the future geniuses to strengthen himself, to weaken the enemy, and to improve his cultivation along the way. Why not? More troublesome was that the area where Mu Bai was located was in the territory of the monster race. The plane of the monsters was in the north with snow all year round. If he wanted to go there, it was necessary to go through the plains of these monsters and face them whenever they appear. When Yang Chen, a disciple of the Jitan realm, entered this plane of the beasts, it was certain to provoke a few incidents. In addition, the location of the first wood true essence was also a hidden place in the plane of the beasts. Yang Chen did not understand the line of thought of the predecessor of that time, putting his own immortal's cave in the plane of the beasts. Could it be that he was originally a monster himself? This was quite possible. There were a lot of monster cultivators in the heavenly court. At that time, the one who was desecrated was not famous. Yang Chen could not have had any contact with him, and his cultivation at the time was very average. Although Yang Chen now had a pair of bodies that didn't look like normal humans with huge horns. Undersea, it was easy to be mistaken for the monster race. He couldn't go otherwise. It was too dangerous, even more so as proven by past events, showing the wickedness of the monster race. The area where the monsters lived was not by their choice. The first determinant of survival there was strength. In many matters, the monster race had not precedence for right or wrong, only strength. Because one's deficient strength, it was a matter of course to be eaten by another powerful monster. No other monster would come out to fight for you. The robbing of resources and spiritual pulses was the norm. Scarface had a cultivation base in the late Yuanying realm, but was barely able to mix and match there. The sinister nature of the monsters was evident. Before leaving, Yang Chen visited a circle of his friends. In the past few decades, everyone had advanced respectively. Du Qian even entered the Jitan realm earlier than Yang Chen, because when Yang Chen was first introduced, Du Qian was already in the late stage of building the foundation. He had been rather slow at entering the Jitan realm in the following decades. What surprised Yang Chen most was Shangyuan Feng, the manager of the Yishu Manor, who in the past had said it was impossible to achieve foundation stage. He had only entered the foundation stage a few years earlier than Yang Chen. Now had already reached the peak of the foundation stage, and only a single step separated him from the early Jitan stage, solidification of core. This could only be explained by one thing. Though the cultivation aptitude was important, the correct cultivation method still could change all of this. Obviously, Shangyuan Feng had found his own path of cultivation. The sect was flourishing, his master was getting rid of her original destiny, and friends were also cultivating well. The sects of the enemy were badly hurt, and all this was caused by Yang Chen's own hands. How can he be any happier than this? If there was something to say, then it was only one. After so many years, Xiao Yan finally thoroughly digested the dragon kai that he had devoured in the treasure house last time. His whole body seemed to have grown up in a circle. In the garden, it danced happily. If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more. Chapter 286. Green Jade Immortal Island Master's Visit. Yang Chen didn't have time to deal with Xiao Yan for the time being. However, he still attached him to a weapon. Xiao Yan's incarnation would always be the appropriate size and shape that best suits his hand, enabling him to use him whenever he pleases. Bi Shanyu also found many high-level magic weapon fragments from the portal of the Dacheng realm. These pieces were favorite foods for Xiao Yan, every piece of broken skin could give it enjoyment for a long time. Looking at Xiao Yan bursting with energy, Yang Chen's heart moved again. There were still a few things in the treasure house of the Dragon Palace that have not been collected. Now Yang Chen's cultivation base had also improved and Xiao Yan had completely absorbed the Dragon Kai. Was it possible to consider going to the Dragon Palace again to collect the rest of the things? However, for the time being, Yang Chen still suppressed this idea. The first few things in the hands of Yang Chen had not been completely collected until now. Secondly, Yang Chen knew in his heart that he always let Xiao Yan exceed his own limits to absorb the Dragon Kai, his growth had not been so good, this must stop. Even so, the growth of Xiao Yan gave Yang Chen a small surprise. The magic treasure pieces he absorbed spiritual power from were thrown away because they had no recycling value. Although the materials were still there, they had been mixed and sacrificial refined in various ways. It was now more difficult to track them than trying to go to heaven. However, the strength of Xiao Yan made Yang Chen somewhat stunned. After Xiao Yan used the magic weapon fragments, there was a miraculous general change in their appearances. The materials were still mixed, but the trace of sacrificial refining had been completely eliminated, as if swallowed by Xiao Yan itself. There were no magic fragments with even a trace of sacrificial refining, thus, these materials could be refined and separated in many ways and become the top materials that could be used. It should be known that this part of the material was basically produced in the portal of the Yuaning and the Dacheng realm, its level was not low. Of course, this advantage, Yang Chen had not yet intended to tell anyone, but he did to let Shangyuan Feng pay attention and collect some magic weapon fragments from the Yuaning and the Dacheng realm portals. In the long history of cultivators, he didn't know how many such things have been piled up in various unknown places so far. If someone has the heart for it, they could collect countless such things. For Yang Chen, these countless magic weapon pieces meant countless high-grade refining materials. Yang Chen's yin-yang 5 elements flying swords were just lacking all kinds of top materials for their sacrificial refining. That was simply like getting cheap raw material delivered to his doorstep. Speaking of it, this time Xiao Yan also had an upgrade. Yang Chen was happy, he had piled a lot of magic weapon pieces around Xiao Yan. Of course, the most important ones were flying swords, Blood Phantom Vine flying sword and First Wood Sword Embryo. Xiao Yan's body was now on the First Wood Sword Embryo. On the top, it was playing with a Blood Demon Vine flying sword in its mouth. Yang Chen wanted to leave, but some people didn't let him. After making up his mind to go to the monster race's domain, he tried to report the matter of his departure to the palace master, but he told him that the Green Jade Immortal Island master had come to visit the Pure Yang Palace. Specifically indicating that Yang Chen must accompany her, there was some business matter to discuss. The arrival of Green Jade Immortal Island Master was a grand matter and the distinguished guest was to be received in a similarly grand manner at the Pure Yang Palace. Not to mention the Pure Yang Palace, even among the top 2 sects in the rankings, which one had a history of receiving a distinguished guest with a similar rank as of the Island Master. However, what surprised Yang Chen was that the Palace Master had told him that the Island Master's visit was this time a secret one. Thus, it did not involve fanciful reception. Also, Yang Chen should not divulge this information. The other party pointed out that Yang Chen should accompany her, there was some business to deal in. He could only obey the instructions. However, what made Yang Chen strange was that, in addition to the two elders of Green Jade Immortal Island, there was another companion, Zhanxian. Yang Chen knew the two elders. One was Yan Huifeng, a master of the Daching realm and the leader of the Great Calamity of Demonic Heart. The other was Guan Yuning, a Yuning realm ancestor. In the past, he chased Yang Chen for a month in the sea and later turned to a friend from an enemy. The island master's appearance was like a 30-years-old woman. The smile on her face seemed very bright. If one didn't know her identity, anyone would take her as a woman full of optimism about life. You wouldn't think that she was one of the leaders of the several major Dao sects. Except for the island master, the people who came were acquaintances who tended to be favorable towards the Puryang Palace. The secretive nature of this was a bit strange. However, since the other party had something to do with business, of course, it was necessary to bring people who will not cause misunderstanding with the Puryang Palace. From this point of view, it was quite normal. This old person is going to have something to discuss with the palace master. You, young people still have a lot to exchange. Unexpectedly, after seeing Yang Chen, the island master only looked at Yang Chen carefully and pushed Zhanxian out to let her get along with Yang Chen alone. This gesture seemed to support Zhanxian and Yang Chen in their own capacity, but the whole hidden action was a bit strange. Making Yang Chen very confused. He didn't understand the motive behind it. Zhanxian was frosty in front of outsiders, but in front of these several seniors, she still had a respectful look. Listening to the island master's tease, her face shone a rare blush. The glamorous face with a shyness to boot, compared to the island master and several elders, was higher by many points. Yang Chen, you take Fairy Shy to go to the Mysian mountain, keep her entertained. The palace master also commanded. The meaning behind the smile on his face couldn't be seen through clearly. Whether it was just for mere etiquette or was it optimism about Yang Chen and Zhanxian's relationship. What could Yang Chen say? He could only leave with Zhanxian after a greeting. It was also funny to think about it. He and Zhanxian were already over 100 years old but were still young people in the eyes of their elders. Zhanxian's face was restored to her usual frostiness. Because the palace master had iterated that this was a secret matter and any information about the island master was not broadcasted, so Yang Chen directly put Zhanxian into the shuttle and soon flew to a high cliff. After arriving above it, they came out. I haven't tasted the tea you cook since a long time. It just happened to be so that my tea leaves had matured, becoming much better. Would you like to try them? Yang Chen looked at Zhanxian, who stood on the cliff. Then looked at the mountains under the cliff. Then laughed and told, I got a nice spirit spring. From the Blue Cloud sect auction. Zhanxian turned her head and suddenly asked, you bought it with Little Shu? Yeah? Yang Chen did not expect that Zhanxian knew of the matters in the Blue Cloud sect so clearly. But he did not feel surprised and just nodded, at that time, I was buying it for alchemy. I've tasted it myself. The best thing to use it for is wine and tea brewing. Seeing that Yang Chen admitted to it, the frost on Zhanxian's face visibly reduced. Yang Chen laid out a complete tea set with a sway of his hands. Yang Chen's movements were not slow. The profound spirit furnace quickly appeared in his hands and the sprouts of the old tea trees that used the spiritual powers were also picked up in a short time. Then they were hung in the profound spirit furnace. If anyone knew that Yang Chen actually used the profound spirit furnace to match the yin-yang burning heavenly fire just to fry tea leaves, it would definitely exacerbate Yang Chen's wasteful temperament. But Zhanxian did not blame him at all, but rather had a look of anticipation. She had no other good food, but she could brew delicious tea. It was rare for Yang Chen to have a common interest with her, and his tea-making technique was not unusual. It let her look forward to his better-looking tea. The effect of the yin-yang burning heavenly fire was not generally good, and Yang Chen had slightly added some 7th metal spiritual power to take care of Zhanxian's taste. Even the process of frying was adapted to Zhanxian's metal-attributed spirit root. After tasting, one would feel an endless aftertaste. The water was of course the spirit spring that Yang Chen bought from the Blue Cloud sect auction site. As for the work of cooking tea, he made Zhanxian do it herself. Looking at the elegant and incomparably beautiful woman's movements while skillfully brewing tea, every move exuding fresh and refined beauty, being alluring at every instance. The tea had not yet been tasted, still it felt like he had already tasted its deliciousness. Taste my craft. Although Zhanxian was cold and proud, but in front of Yang Chen whether it was action or language, a feeling of a wife serving her husband was shown. She even served the tea to Yang Chen with both hands. Though her face did not carry a too intimate expression. The hot tea would make any person feel the warmth in the whole body. With the exclusively mixed yin-yang burning heavenly fire and 7th metal spirit power made a person to forget everything. Even Yang Chen, the initiator of this event, felt such enjoyment, not to mention that even Zhanxian was intoxicated. This time, the tea leaves brewing process clearly showed that Yang Chen's control after his cultivation base had improved. The seventh metal was good, and the fire was unbelievable. The hard-feeling thing hidden in the tea was like a metal, it was the infamous skill of Zhanxian. While drinking the tea, the spiritual power of the whole body became stimulated and started moving feverishly. The short moment of enjoyment could almost match the effect of one heavenly circulation. The beauty of Zhanxian suddenly lit up. She did not expect that Yang Chen's tea was so different than before. It was just delicious before, but now it was even affecting her cultivation. It did not have just the delicious taste anymore. Looking at Zhanxian's amazed eyes, Yang Chen couldn't help but laugh. The reason why he prepared all those things was that he wanted to force such a reaction from Zhanxian. Sure enough, the purpose of surprising Zhanxian had been achieved. Yang Chen was no longer restrained and laughed out. "How has my craft improved?" Yang Chen had a mind to show off and asked with a smile. Looking at Yang Chen's proud face, Zhanxian only gave him a smile, which was the reward. Soon she recovered her frosty expression. If Yang Chen didn't know from his several contacts with her that Zhanxian did give him a high praise, maybe he would have misunderstood that she was not satisfied. It happened to be the sunset, watching the dying sun slowly falling, neither of them had any interest in talking. One person, a jade cup, a small mouthful of taste, untasted by all others, it seemed that even the mood was tranquil. These are well collected. When you have time, you can drink more. Yang Chen cooked more than just for this tea, much more, then he directly sealed them in a jade box, sealed it with a symbol seal, and gave it to Zhanxian. "Thank you." Zhanxian was not polite at all and collected it. "Why should you say such a word between us?" Yang Chen said very casually. But immediately realized that he said something wrong, then want to take it back, only to miss the timing. "Also, between you and me, I don't have to thank you." Zhanxian took it seriously, and her mouth shone a happy expression. Yang Chen couldn't help but sigh again. When he faced this beautiful female, he would always be so unsettled and careless with his words, causing such misunderstandings. Could it be that he couldn't resist the beauty of this female? Or was it because of the prestige of Zhanxian's later generation that he must pay attention to? He could not think it clearly. However, there was a point that Yang Chen couldn't deny it. He liked to sit in a place like this with Zhanxian very casually. He didn't talk much, just watching the surrounding scenery and drinking delicious tea. He didn't know how, whether it was fighting or leisure, it seemed that both Yang Chen and Zhanxian had a silent tacit understanding. Zhanxian also enjoyed this atmosphere. She hadn't talked for a long time. Until the night's color was drooping, she sighed and said, "Yang Chen, I told the island master of the matter last time." Then. Yang Chen gave a cry but did not say anything. Zhanxian was originally a person from the Green Jade Immortal Island. If she told the island master of her own whereabouts, what was the fuss? That batch of 10,000 years spirit medicine, island master also knew. Zhanxian said another thing. "Well, that is yours." Yang Chen said the sentence, but it was a little more, once again acknowledging the ownership of Zhanxian. This sentence said so much more, answering all the questions Zhanxian imagined. She thought that Yang Chen would be a little surprised and even uneasy, but she didn't think that he would have no reaction at all. Zhanxian understood that he really regarded those things as hers and never thought about taking them back. This feeling of being trusted seemed to be different from the sect. "This time, I want to ask you something." Zhanxian said slightly in a whisper. "What?" Yang Chen still asked in a calm tone. The questioning inner heart pill's raw materials are actually those 10,000 years spirit medicine. Zhanxian's eyes stared at the ground and didn't look at his side, carefully masked, she continued, "Can you help out? Use my medicinal ingredients to refine a batch of questioning inner heart pills." If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more. Chapter 287. Ensemble organized without problems. There were not many alchemist masters in the cultivation world. It was not that everyone did not want to learn alchemy. But because of talent, perception, hobbies, etc., the number of alchemist masters was not many. Therefore, it was commonplace for one to prepare their own medicinal ingredients and then ask the alchemist masters to help them in refining it. At the invitation of Elder Wu Xiong, Yang Chen participated in the process of refining the heaven-seizing pill. Not only him, Deng Yi, Zhu Peng, He Lianyan, even Fan Shan, who was not an alchemy master, had such an experience. It was not surprising that Zhanxian made this request to Yang Chen. Just because of the special nature of the questioning inner heart pill was now the exclusive resource of the Pure Yang Palace. Zhanxian was not sure whether Yang Chen would accept. Thus, she felt very embarrassed asking for it. "Okay." Yang Chen almost did not consider the answer. Zhanxian, who was a frosty person all the year round, could not help but show a hint of surprise. However, what are you going to give me, this alchemy master? Yang Chen wanted Zhanxian to show more expressions and asked. It was also very normal for the alchemy master to help people to refine their alchemy and receive remuneration. In fact, almost all alchemists did this, with no exceptions. She didn't expect Yang Chen to be so refreshed. She remained in the shocked state. When she heard Yang Chen's request, she responded hurriedly, what conditions do you want? Can you give me anything? Yang Chen looked at Zhanxian with a smile. As long as the Green Jade Immortal Island can afford it. Zhanxian did not go to Yang Chen's side, but replied steadily. That's fine. Yang Chen smiled and continued, when the island master and palace master finished their discussion, I will consider what I want. This was very normal. Yang Chen was still a person of the Pure Yang Palace. Such a big thing, of course, must be verified by the palace master. This point Zhanxian also understood, in fact, Yang Chen's approach was just like what she told the island master. Actually, the questioning inner heart pill, which was auctioned by the Pure Yang Palace a few years ago, was bought by my sect. After Zhanxian sat silent for a while, she said suddenly without caring whether Yang Chen was listening. But she knew that Yang Chen would certainly hear it. As it cost a lot of money. Yang Chen didn't know the grand occasion of the auction and didn't know what the final price was, but it must have been costly. Connected to the best alchemist in the sect, the Hall Masters, shared 3 to study, each one was broken into powder. Zhanxian did not know what psychology she had, always felt that she had to tell Yang Chen everything. Then she got the point and slowly said, they found out the medicinal ingredients in it, but the refining techniques you used could not be deciphered. Sure enough, they were the masters of the big sects. Knowing the preciousness of the questioning inner heart pill that could be used by a master of the Daching realm, they still resolutely took out 3 pills to study and try replicating it. The refining technique could not be ordinary, but unfortunately, they still underestimated the questioning inner heart pill. The reason why the questioning inner heart pill could have that effect was 30% due to the use of the medicinal herbs, and the remaining 70% was due to the refining technique. To produce the questioning inner heart pill was like knowing the refining technique. Unless a 7th grade alchemist master existed, it was impossible. 7th grade alchemist master, it was not so easy for one to appear in the immortal world, not to mention in the mortal world. Even if all the alchemy divisions in the mortal world were added up, it was impossible to get through the refining techniques of the questioning inner heart pill. It took the price of a fortune, but in the end, they had to find Yang Chen again. It could be said that Green Jade Immortal Island was also very helpless. However, it was obvious to all that the questioning inner heart pill was strong. The island master and the elders have witnessed it and said that they must also make greater benefits of the Pure Yang Palace in exchange for a batch of questioning inner heart pill. Compared with resources, the most important thing in the martial arts sects was people. If the masters of Green Jade Immortal Island emerge in an endless stream, it would last forever and they would be able to do whatever they wanted. Just as Zhanxian and Yang Chen still had such a relationship, the sect must of course would use it. Zhanxian was also under the inquiry of the sect. After hesitating for a long time, she said that she had gone out with Yang Chen and exchanged a batch of spiritual medicines. Since there was the source, then everything was easy to do. The island master asked Zhanxian and Yang Chen to go out alone. They also hoped that Zhanxian could persuade Yang Chen to make a move. She, Elder Guan and Elder Min, were persuading the palace master. Zhanxian was very worried that Yang Chen would be in conflict about it. Therefore, she did not mention this matter at the beginning, but she did not think that Yang Chen did not have any reservations at all. It was just a normal proposal in exchange of payment, it was 100 times smoother than the imagination of Zhanxian and the island master. The more this was the case, Zhanxian felt that there seems to be a place in her heart that was slowly loosening and softening. She and Yang Chen were together originally because of a misunderstanding. Of course, the initiator was herself. She did not know what the sect master and elders thought, but she felt they were a strong match. However, after several contacts, Zhanxian became more and more understanding of Yang Chen and was also scared of their 2 silent tacit understandings. Yang Chen never asked for any further contact, which was exactly what Zhanxian wanted. However, the feeling of more and more tacit understanding made Zhanxian fearful. She was afraid that one day she would not be able to put on her frosty face in front of Yang Chen. If. Zhanxian hesitated for a long time and still carefully asked, if you agree to the island master, what are you going to ask for as the payment? Fire seeds. Yang Chen almost did not hesitate to blurt out, I will specify 3rd and 4th grade fire seeds. How many? When she heard that Yang Chen only wanted fire seeds, her heart was even more relieved. For a big sect like Green Jade Immortal Island, 3rd and 4th grade fire seeds were not so unimaginable. That depends on how many questioning inner heart pills you want. Yang Chen smiled and said very casually, your share is enough to ask for 2 complete furnaces of questioning inner heart pill. With my current ability, it would produce at least 20 pills. 1/5, 10 4th and 43rd grade fire seeds, wouldn't be excessive, right? The questioning inner heart pill could be of help to the master of the Daching realm. To put it bluntly, if Green Jade Immortal Island was willing, each one could make a Yuning realm master upgrade to the Daching realm. If there were really 20 masters of the Daching realm, even if it was the greatest heaven sect and the 5-element sect, it would necessitate giving face to the Green Jade Immortal Island. Acquiring 20 Daching realm masters in exchange for 1/5, 10 4th and 43rd grade fire seeds was not a loss for the Green Jade Immortal Island, but in fact a big bargain. Zhanxian once again fell into a sluggish state. She completely didn't imagine that Yang Chen would use such a low price to refine questioning inner heart pills. Switching to any one of the alchemy masters, it was estimated that they would take this opportunity to heavily blackmail them. The only explanation was that because of this, Zhanxian almost unknowingly attributed the reason to herself. Of course, she thought so, but Zhanxian did not say a word. How is your body shape getting worse and worse? After a long time, Zhanxian asked. However, looking at this situation, it seemed to be breaking the deadlock. If Yang Chen's body shape had changed, anyone could have seen it when he meets him, how could she say it only now? The kind of refining body technique. Yang Chen smiled and stood up, not too early, let's go back first. It is estimated that the island master and the palace master must have been waiting impatiently. This time, Zhanxian did not say anything, got up and followed Yang Chen, soon they returned to the Puryang Palace's main hall. As expected, the island master and the 2 elders had arranged their accommodations under the concealed but enthusiastic hospitality of the Puryang Palace. Elder Gao Xian was still waiting there alone. Zhanxian was a guest. The high elders directly sent a Jitan realm core disciple and made Zhanxian go to the courtyard where the island master and the 2 elders stayed. After everything was settled, Yang Chen returned to the hall. After the restrictions were placed, Elder Gao used several secret techniques directly. Yang Chen and Elder Gao appeared in the ramp of the Blue Vault Mountain Immortal's cave. Entering the hall through the ramp, he saw the palace master and several other elders. Yang Chen, did Fairy Shy tell you about the intention of the island master? The master of the palace directly asked him to sit down and asked. She did. Yang Chen nodded. What do you think? Asked the palace master. Everything will be in accordance with the instructions of the palace master. If the palace master agrees, then this disciple will refine it for them. If the palace master does not, then forget it. Yang Chen must be consistent with the sect on this issue. The palace master and the elders, of course, were expecting to see this kind of attitude from Yang Chen. Everyone listened to Yang Chen's words, and they silently nodded their heads. The meaning of the island master is that half of the income of the 100,000 mountain Green Jade Immortal Island will be handed over to the sect within 20 years. In the future, there will be more cooperation between the 2 sides. The palace master nodded and expressed the sincerity of the island master today. What do you think? This question was asked clearly for Yang Chen's decision. The palace master turned to see the others understanding, but the elders behind him did not have a single question, indicating that everyone had the same mind. Yang Chen had been regarded as an elder who could express his opinions. The disciple is afraid. Yang Chen was moved by some people. He was just a little Jitan realm master. In the Puryang Palace, he was not a top-ranking member, but he received this honor. You don't have any burden, you talk about your opinion. The palace master swayed and stopped Yang Chen's words, your opinion is very important. The palace master's words were very flattering for Yang Chen. It seemed that if Yang Chen said that he was not willing, the sect intended to push away this possible cooperation. Please forgive this disciple. Yang Chen knew that he couldn't speak for himself. He could only plead guilty first and then slowly said, since the island master is sincere, this disciple feels that it is a good idea to cooperate. Anyway, this is a questioning inner heart pill. No matter when you need it, with this cooperation, you may be able to bring the relationship closer and my sect can also improve their strength. Well, if that is the case, then I would reply to the island master tomorrow. The master of the palace said with a smile, we have a few old guys who think this is a good opportunity. However, cooperation is cooperation, your share cannot be cheap. Despite the opening, Green Jade Immortal Island is rich in wealth and it is unnecessary to meet their expectations. This disciple also said to Fairy Shy that some fire seeds should be used as compensation. Yang Chen also did not conceal this from the elders and directly said the rewards and the passages he had mentioned at the time, they must have large assets in the Green Jade Immortal Island and they won't care about this level of compensation. When they heard that Yang Chen had already thought of the people in front of him and even put forward his own personal rewards, The palace master and several elders began to laugh as if by prior agreement. Yang Chen actually limited the number of pills to only 20. Others were not clear. Why were they still unclear? Yang Chen gave the sect 25 second-grade questioning inner heart pills through one refining process, while he was going to refine only 21st-grade questioning inner heart pills from 2 refining processes for Green Jade Immortal Island. The lesser-graded ones had to have at least the same amount as the second-grade questioning inner heart pills. Thus, this was still the most conservative estimate. But so many second-grade questioning inner heart pill, the people present at the scene could almost guarantee the outcome. If they practice hard, they could enter the Daching realm. If the Pure Yang Palace had so many masters of the Daching realm, why could they not enter the ranks of first-class big sects? If these extra benefits were not counted, the half income of the 100,000 mountains from Green Jade Immortal Island for 20 years would be enough to meet the accumulation of hundreds of years from Yang Chen. Pure Yang Palace had indeed the best development opportunity in history. These were all material benefits, there was no calculation of the favors the Green Jade Immortal Island would owe to the Pure Yang Palace because of this. The favors of the Green Jade Immortal Island were enough to match the same number of material objects. This time, the Pure Yang Palace had gained a lot of benefits. Early the next morning, the palace master went to the guest quarters personally to visit the island master, explaining the meaning of the cooperation. On Yang Chen's own request, Zhanxian had already told the island master that he could at least get 20 questioning inner heart pills. The island master and the 2 elders were all overjoyed. As for the fire seeds that Yang Chen asked for, the Green Jade Immortal Island was not worried in the least, they were not worth mentioning. Both sides had achieved their goals and were happy. The Green Jade Immortal Island would have these 20 questioning inner heart pills, their strength would definitely soar. The Pure Yang Palace was also entering the ranks of rapid development, a win-win situation, so everyone was smiling. The cooperation was successful, and it was not rare to celebrate. Yang Chen's Jade Dragon wine was naturally a must-have. When the guests and the host were happy, the Zhanxian, the director of the Foreign Affairs Hall, came to the side of the palace master. "What is it?" Seeing Zhanxian's face was unusual, the palace master asked, and even involved the island master. A few fellow Taoists from the Greatest Heaven sect came, saying that there are important things to discuss and want to call the palace master. If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more. Chapter 288. We must consider carefully. There were a few people coming from the Greatest Heaven sect to visit. The Foreign Affairs Master had to be prudent. There may have been other insiders in the sect as well. Now the Pure Yang Palace had just closed a cooperative deal with the Green Jade Immortal Island. Some people came from the Greatest Heaven sect, could it be that they noticed something? The Palace Master is the one who they want to casually come to see. The high-ranking elder Zhanxian directly refuted Zhanxian, sent someone to receive them and ask what is going on. Palace Master, those who came are 15 in number. Zhanxian clenched his teeth and could only tell the truth, there is also a long-time elder of the Daching realm who had appeared from seclusion since a long time ago. All others are Yuning realm ancestors. The leader is the Foreign Affairs Hallmaster of the Greatest Heaven sect. The master of the Daching realm, plus the 14 Yuning realm ancestors, this was definitely not a peaceful visit. Everyone's faces had changed in color. What did this mean? Please, I asked the island master to be more cautious and avoid meeting them firsthand. The palace master got up and said to the guests, the island master and several Green Jade Immortal Island elders. Then turned around and told Zhanxian, serve the Green Jade Immortal Island's distinguished guests. Let's go and see them. Since the Greatest Heaven sect had dispatched a long-time elder of the Daching realm, it was also appropriate for the head of the palace to act. The other side had such a strong lineup, the palace master and elder Zheng Feng had already psychologically prepared for that matter. Fortunately, Yang Chen and the palace master had an inkling of the subject, thus, everything was arranged properly. The person who came was a very high-ranking elder, and Zhanxian was arranged as the reception in the main hall of the Pure Yang Palace. When the palace master rushed to arrive, there were 15 people from the Greatest Heaven sect who were sitting in the seats of the main hall. They were sitting, but the 15 people all had frosty looks on their faces, they did not hide their auras either. In the entire hall, there was an indescribable atmosphere of battle. Even the disciples of the Pure Yang Palace, who were responsible for serving them, were feeling like participating in treacherous battles. Everyone had a scented tea next to them, but no one picked it up or took a drink. 15 people remained quiet while sitting and waiting. It turned out that Elder Ming and Hallmaster Mao came to visit and brought the Pure Yang Palace to glory. The face of the palace master had a far-sighted smile. When he had not arrived, his voice passed to the hall. Yang Chen's body status had changed, there was no way to enter the main hall of the Pure Yang Palace, thus, only a few elders followed. However, this did not prevent Yang Chen from releasing a few traces of his spiritual awareness threads, exploring the movements in the main hall. Now everyone's conversation made it to his ears. Mao Kai was the foreign affairs master of the greatest heaven sect, also the person who led the team this time. The Elder Ming's full name was Ming Guangguo, he was the master of the Dacheng realm, who discovered the aura of Yang Chen's welcoming formation and pursued its tracks. At the same time, he was also sitting in the Tianmen gate of the greatest heaven sect, called the Shaman Town. Responsible for leading tactics for the sect master. It was precisely because Ming Guangguo had been sitting in the town of Shaman and been in contact with the greatest heaven sect for many years, so he was very familiar with the welcoming array. When Yang Chen's formation was launched, even if it was thousands of miles apart, he was still aware of the spiritual fluctuations over there. This time I took the liberty, I also asked the palace to forgive the sin. Mao Kai was also a foreign affairs master, a slick role. However, in front of the greatest heaven sect's people, there was still a hint of awkwardness in his body language. Though his mouth expressed beautiful words, his face didn't show matching expressions. The master of the palace had overseen the portal for many years. He was adept at handling this kind of situations. It was very difficult for the two sides to mingle with each other. Palace master then got seated in the main position. He then asked, Hallmaster Mao and Elder Ming had come this time. What advice are you going to offer? Palace master I am in a difficult situation, please forgive me for discussing it. Mao Kai's words were beautiful, but they did not have any embarrassing posture at all. It was a direct opening, our sect was destroyed, the vengeance had still not been exacted. The murderers are still at large, the sects strive each day to find the murderers, they dare not slack off even a single day. Naturally. The palace master immediately reacted on the words and said with impatience, my Puryang palace has also been affected with a damaged mountain gate. Like your situation, it had been very painful. The Puryang palace is naturally obligatory to track down the murderers. If you need any help, please, do tell. These words were even more beautiful than Mao Kai, even if everyone knew that this was just a phrase to please the guests, but no one pointed it out. After all, the Puryang palace did encounter the destruction of their mountain gate, the initiator was the greatest heaven sect. Mao Kai and Ming Guangguo were both people who knew the inside story. Listening to the palace master's discourse about it made them feel a bit embarrassment as well. However, this time the greatest heaven sect was really at a loss, they had to suspect many people. Puryang palace was a very doubtful one. In the past, the Puryang palace had been ruined by Liang Shaming. Although, it was unclear whether they knew the connection between them and the traitor, they could still have a potential motive. Another reason was the materials. The income of the 100,000 mountains had made many sects jealous. At the same time, some rare materials had also fallen into the hands of the Puryang palace. This sect had the financial power to arrange a welcoming formation. Even if it was not made by the Puryang palace, their material could have as well made it to the outside. This could come under legit suspicion. Mao Kai's arrival was to inquire about this very point, asking about the distribution chain of materials possessed by the Puryang palace. If that's the case, then we will take the liberty. Mao Kai had a guilty conscience, but he didn't show it here. He immediately climbed up and took out a piece of jade, handing it to the palace master. Then continued with a smile, I just want to know if there is such a batch of materials in the Puryang palace. Materials? The palace master pretended to take the list and then handed it over to the elder Zheng Feng. Zheng elder, you are in charge of our sacred warehouse, would you take a look? After commanding elder Zheng Feng, the palace master turned back to face Mao Kai and Ming Guangguo. Ming Guangguo also seemed to know that he was not good at dealing with these types of situations, thus, he did not interfere, allowed Mao Kai to preside over. However, the palace master could only show respect to him, so when he spoke, he must also explain it to Elder Ming. Most of the materials should be available. Palace master admitted but continued, but the old man remembers that there are some rare ones, and he needed a confirmation from Elder Zheng Feng. As soon as the greatest heaven sect's delegation heard the palace master's confirmation, the delegates' eyes shined with unmasked hostility. Palace master, we have these materials in possession since a few years now. Elder Zheng Feng did not seem to find any particular reservation about the current situation, and after reading the list, he quickly replied. You have all of them? When Mao Kai heard the words of Elder Zheng Feng, he became even more spirited. Even the Elder Ming, who had partly closed eyes, now have been leaning forward from his seat. He stared at the palace master with widened eyes. They seemed to be waiting for the confirmation from the palace master. Elder Zheng had overseen my sect's warehouse for many years. So, if Elder Zheng says that we have them, then we do. The palace master gave a slight smile, ignoring the performance of the greatest heaven sect's delegates. He seemed very certain. We also ask Elder Zheng Feng to move these materials out and let us see them. Since Palace Master had confirmed, Mao Kai was no longer polite and made a request directly. Take it out and let you have a look. The elders of the Pure Yang Palace, including the Palace Master, all had a blank expression on their faces. It was difficult to cover the surprise on the face of the Palace Master. He asked, but why? It would be good that I explain to the Palace Master, so he knows. In the eyes of Mao Kai, there was a faint trace of a threat. My greatest heaven sect was destroyed and countless disciples were killed. It was due to a kind of an array. The materials needed for the arrangement of such a formation are among those. Anyone who has these materials is a suspect. If we have the materials, then we are judged as suspects. The Palace Master did not speak, but Elder Gao Xian standing behind him had already interjected. He then continued, isn't this too much? The enmity for the destruction of my sect is absolutely irreconcilable. Mao Kai's face was now replaced by another kind of coldness. If you have everything in the Pure Yang Palace, then everything is easy to suspect. If not, I ask the Palace Master to personally travel to my greatest heaven sect to give an explanation to my sect master. When this sentence was spoken, the faces of all the Pure Yang Palace elders and disciples flashed with a lot of anger. For this reason, it was obvious that the dozen or so Yuning realm ancestors came along with a master of the Dacheng realm. This was simply an explicit provocation. Once something incriminating was found, they would surely resolve it then and there. If you have it all worked out, why ask us? Elder Gao Xian continued in place of the Palace Master. If the Palace Master started to talk, there would be no room for a change, but if Elder Gao acts, even if it was unsuitable, it could be glossed over by the Palace Master. The delegates of the Greatest Heaven sect also had this idea. Mao Kai discussed while Ming Guangguo stayed quiet in the back. If the situation turned for the worse, he would come forward like a great elder. How many things had been received by the Pure Yang Palace in recent years, your sect has probably counted the number. Mao Kai also knew that this time, this couldn't be forced too much. After all, the Pure Yang Palace was now not the same as it used to be. Then he said, if the number is similar, then there would not be any problems. Seemingly his intentions were good, but they only hid grave problems. The exact income of the Pure Yang Palace of a few decades would be known to the other party. The issues that could arise in part of this were simply shocking to one's heart. What if my sect did not allow you to look into our warehouse? Elder Gao Xian asked again. Snort. All the sects possessing these materials will be regarded as suspects. All must be examined one by one. Mao Kai waved a hand and did not give Elder Gao any face while continuing, if you do not let us examine them, then I am afraid that will be considered as holding a guilty conscience. Thus, the Palace Master will have to return to my sect with us. What big words. The people in the Pure Yang Palace had not answered to these words. Someone had already taken the chance to reply, you want to check out our sect's warehouse, then take this old me to go to your greatest heaven sect to check yours. The voice belonged to a girl, the Green Jade Immortal Island Master. Naturally, followed by the two elders of the Green Jade Immortal Island, Zhanxian also followed. Bold. Mao Kai screamed and was about to become violent when he suddenly saw the figure of the Island Master. Shocked, his arrogant look disappeared without a trace and was replaced by a pair of panicked eyes. For those who were from the Pure Yang Palace, the greatest heaven sect would dare to swear at. After all, the strength of the two sides was too far apart, but in the face of the Island Master of the Green Jade Immortal Island, let alone Mao Kai, even if the sect master of the greatest heaven sect came over, he would be afraid to be scornful. It was already a big offense for Mao Kai just to dare to scream at the Island Master. Slap yourself with your hand. The voice of the Island Master was not loud, but it was not a polite command at all. Greatest Heaven Sect Foreign Affairs Hallmaster Mao Kai, even with the Elder Ming who was in the Dacheng realm on his side, he still did not dare to refute one sentence. Directly reached out and strongly slapped his own face. Then immediately said, is the Island Master satisfied with this? What wrong? So, if we also have such material, then are we the enemy who attacked you? The reason why the Island Master appeared was because of the words from Mao Kai. He had to slap himself when he dared to berate the Island Master, and now this was the topic. I don't dare. It's just that my sect is suffering and tens of thousands of disciples are dying. I have to find justice for them. Mao Kai was a foreign affairs master. He still had skill in his mouth, even though he said so himself. But he must still clarify his own reason. The Green Jade Immortal Island is of course not suspected, but other sects, I am allowed to check them one by one. Since the other side said that the Green Jade Immortal Island was not suspected and slapped himself in the face, he gave face to the Green Jade Immortal Island. It was not appropriate to pursue the idea again. It is necessary to clear suspicion, my Pure Yang Palace did not do such, and I am not afraid of knocking at the door in the middle of the night. The Palace Master finally came out to play around, since the friends from the Greatest Heaven Sect want to examine them. Then let them look at it. Although the words were polite, the grievances in his tone were heard by everyone. Of course, the Pure Yang Palace did not have the arrogance of the greatest heaven sect. Naturally, it couldn't be like the sect master of the Green Jade Immortal Island, and he couldn't dare to make the other party slap himself. Palace Master, he has great understanding, I offended you. Mao Kai saw that Palace Master was finally accepting, naturally he was no longer arrogant and immediately changed his tone. Then looked at Elder Zheng Feng, waiting for him to make the arrangement. Elder Zheng Feng frowned. Some of his words and thoughts were seen through by everyone from the greatest heaven sect. They felt that there was something wrong with this. What's wrong? The Palace Master stared at him and asked very strangely, are you not going to get them? Lord of the Palace, these materials. Elder Zheng Feng looked at the Palace Master and then looked at the people present. His face shone a reluctant expression for a long time. Then he opened his mouth and said, these materials can't be taken out immediately. Brush. Everyone's eyes were now concentrated on the body of Elder Zheng. The greatest heaven sect's delegates' eyes also contained open hostility. If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more. Chapter 289. Seeing is believing. These materials were necessary to construct the welcoming array. The intelligence of the greatest heaven sect said that they had enough materials to build a complete array with their materials. Now Elder Zheng actually said that these materials could not be taken out. Didn't it mean that the Pure Yang Palace had the biggest suspicion? Originally, there was once a sinister ruin in Pure Yang Palace. The key to this was that the high-level members of the greatest heaven sect were certainly in doubt whether the Pure Yang Palace knew it. Now, with the performance of the Pure Yang Palace, were they the culprits? Of course, they were correct in such a fine test. Pure Yang Palace had already known all the secrets and Yang Chen was the one who detonated the formation in their sect. However, who would admit it? How can you not get it? The anger on the face of the Palace Master was apparent. Lord of the Palace, these materials were all good materials for refining flying swords. Zheng Feng hurriedly explained, you forgot, 30 years ago, you told the sect disciple, Gao Yu, to refine a number of good flying sword embryos for the sect. To use them as a real-life source magic weapons for a group of outstanding disciples. In the past 30 years, Gao Yu has successively refined these materials into swords, most of them have been given out. How could they be taken out? A reminder of Elder Zheng Feng was what Yang Chen and the Palace Master had discussed as countermeasures. Yang Chen listened in the distance and smiled in his heart. This time, the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island came out. How could they just let these delegates of the greatest heaven sect not eat back their words and leave peacefully? Listening to this, the Palace Master acted as if he suddenly realized what had happened and slapped his head, I really forgot. After that, he turned to the greatest heaven sect's delegation like he was very sorry to say, we have really made fellow Taoists laugh at us, we have already made them into sword embryos. They really can't be taken out. The masters from the greatest heaven sect, headed by Elder Ming, all had a pale facial expression and looked at the Palace Master without saying a word. Mao Kai was staring at the people of the Pure Yang Palace with an extremely skeptical look. After a while, he said, they have already been given out, they couldn't go far, why not let these disciples come? Bring them out, making me and the others see them. That is a good suggestion. The Palace Master waved without demur, the disciples who have won them as rewards are to be called out, the remaining swords are also to be brought out. This time, Elder Zheng Feng no longer said anything more, he turned and left. After a while, he came back to the hall with a lot of sword embryos and at least a dozen flying swords. I have already told people to call the disciples here, they will arrive in a minute. Elder Zheng Feng was very simple this time. When he came back, he returned to the Palace Master and continued, these are the sword embryos that have not yet been rewarded. This scene made the people of the Green Jade Immortal Island and the greatest heaven sect a little confused. However, the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island sat and watched quietly. Mao Kai and the several of the masters he brought turned their heads and signaled them to look forward. The two Yuning realm ancestors were also well versed in refining, everyone in the field knew. The two walked up unceremoniously, picked up one slippery sword embryo each, looked at their handles very carefully, as if afraid of missing out on the minutest clue. After a while, the two talents took turns to look at the handles of more than a dozen flying swords. Then turned back to their original seats. One of the Yuning realm ancestors smiled and said, sure enough, Palace Master has an outstanding disciple, Fairy Gao's refining technique's essence is as deep as Elder Wang's. With her Jidan realm cultivation base, in comparison to all the refining that this old man has seen, her swords are the best. His opening words were of recognition of the supreme grade of these flying swords. It was indeed made from the materials in the provided list of materials, but it was not so obvious. These words provoked Yang Chen's far-sighted laughter. These sword embryos were all made by Yuning realm ancestors. Even if the level of the refiner was worse, they could make up for it with their cultivation base. Moreover, they let Gao Yu finally process it, not really use spiritual awareness. How could they possibly detect this trick? Although it was acknowledged that these swords were made of those materials, and the materials were very high grade, the quality of flying swords was equally good. But these materials were only a small part of the quantity, more than half of the quantity was still missing, the same was still enough to arrange a welcoming array. Reporting to the palace master, those disciples have brought them. The people waited for a while in the main hall. After less than half an hour, some people came in and reported to the palace master. Let them all come in, the seniors of the greatest heaven sect want to see them. The palace master said to him directly. Soon, a total of 17 Zhanxian realm disciples walked in a line. There were men and women standing in the open space among the crowds. They stood in 2 rows and quickly greeted the palace master as well as all the others in the hall. Greetings to the palace master. Greetings to the elders. Greetings to the predecessors. Quenching the life source magic weapon was usually after the Zhanxian realm. These disciples were the younger generation disciples who had great potential. They were clearly the backbone of the Pure Yang Palace, but they would not let them temper their life source magic weapon at this time. The 17 disciples, one of whom has a magic weapon with a golden seal, which consumes the most materials. Elder Zheng Feng introduced and even took out a list and handed it to Mao Kai. Above the list, these disciples were recorded with their merits and when they obtained the sword embryo of the flying swords as a reward, making everything clear. What were the names of the rewarded swords, the characteristics, the materials used and their number, the size and weights, were also clearly written. According to the records on the list, the materials that the greatest heaven sect's report said were basically in it. The numbers and the quoted number of the greatest heaven sect was about the same, the maximum difference was about 10 jin. 10 jin of difference in materials was impossible to be enough to completely arrange a large welcoming array. All Master Mao, my Pure Yang Palace is not afraid of the greatest heaven sect, but I feel that the relationship between the two sides that was established with great difficulty should not be destroyed by the actions of a despicable villain. Elder Zheng Feng had everything in hand, naturally he was not afraid to talk. What words currently does Hallmaster Mao have to say? After Mao Kai finished reading the list, it was not good to say anything. He only gave the list to the Elder Ming Guangruo who did not say anything and ignored the words of Elder Zheng Feng. After seeing the list one by one, the Elder Ming had no expressions on his face. Then he finally said slowly. Speaking of it, it's all on paper. Where are the products of these materials? It would be good to know that these numbers are also true in reality. When the words came out, the faces of the people suddenly changed. These materials were necessary to construct the welcoming array. The intelligence of the greatest heaven sect said that they had enough materials to build a complete array with their materials. Now Elder Zheng actually said that these materials could not be taken out. Didn't it mean that the Pure Yang Palace had the biggest suspicion? Originally, there was once a sinister ruin in Pure Yang Palace. The key to this was that the high-level members of the greatest heaven sect were certainly in doubt whether the Pure Yang Palace knew it. Now, with the performance of the Pure Yang Palace, were they the culprits? Of course, they were correct in such a fine test. Pure Yang Palace had already known all the secrets and Yang Chen was the one who detonated the formation in their sect. However, who would admit it? How can you not get it? The anger on the face of the palace master was apparent. Lord of the palace, these materials were all good materials for refining flying swords. Zheng Feng hurriedly explained, you forgot, 30 years ago, you told the sect disciple, Gao Yu, to refine a number of good flying sword embryos for the sect. To use them as a real-life source magic weapons for a group of outstanding disciples. In the past 30 years, Gao Yu has successively refined these materials into swords, most of them have been given out. How could they be taken out? A reminder of Elder Zheng Feng was what Yang Chen and the palace master had discussed as countermeasures. Yang Chen listened in the distance and smiled in his heart. This time, the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island came out. How could they just let these delegates of the greatest heaven sect not eat back their words and leave peacefully? Listening to this, the palace master acted as if he suddenly realized what had happened and slapped his head, I really forgot. After that, he turned to the greatest heaven sect's delegation like he was very sorry to say, we have really made fellow Taoists laugh at us, we have already made them into sword embryos. They really can't be taken out. The masters from the greatest heaven sect, headed by Elder Ming, all had a pale facial expression and looked at the palace master without saying a word. Mao Kai was staring at the people of the Pure Yang Palace with an extremely skeptical look. After a while, he said, they have already been given out, they couldn't go far, why not let these disciples come? Bring them out, making me and the others see them. That is a good suggestion. The palace master waved without demur, the disciples who have won them as rewards are to be called out, the remaining swords are also to be brought out. This time, Elder Zhang no longer said anything more, he turned and left. After a while, he came back to the hall with a lot of sword embryos and at least a dozen flying swords. I have already told people to call the disciples here, they will arrive in a minute. Elder Zhang was very simple this time. When he came back, he returned to the palace master and continued, these are the sword embryos that have not yet been rewarded. This scene made the people of the Green Jade Immortal Island and the Greatest Heaven sect a little confused. However, the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island sat and watched quietly. Mao Kai and the several of the masters he brought turned their heads and signaled them to look forward. The two Yuaning realm ancestors were also well versed in refining, everyone in the field knew. The two walked up unceremoniously, picked up one slippery sword embryo each, looked at their handles very carefully, as if afraid of missing out on the minutest clue. After a while, the two talents took turns to look at the handles of more than a dozen flying swords. Then turned back to their original seats. One of the Yuaning realm ancestors smiled and said, sure enough, Palace Master has an outstanding disciple, Fairy Gao's refining techniques essence is as deep as Elder Wang's. With her Jitan realm cultivation base, in comparison to all the refining that this old man has seen, her swords are the best. His opening words were of recognition of the supreme grade of these flying swords. It was indeed made from the materials in the provided list of materials, but it was not so obvious. These words provoked Yang Chen's far-sighted laughter, these sword embryos were all made by Yuaning realm ancestors, even if the level of the refiner was worse, they could make up for it with their cultivation base. Moreover, they let Gao Yu finally process it, not really use spiritual awareness. How could they possibly detect this trick? Although it was acknowledged that these swords were made of those materials, and the materials were very high grade, the quality of flying swords was equally good. But these materials were only a small part of the quant.I tie, more than half of the quant.I tie was still missing, the same was still enough to arrange a welcoming array. Reporting to the palace master, those disciples have brought them. The people waited for a while in the main hall. After less than half an hour, some people came in and reported to the palace master. Let them all come in, the seniors of the Greatest Heaven sect want to see them. The palace master said to him directly. Soon, a total of 17 Jitan realm disciples walked in a line. There were men and women standing in the open spac among the crowds. They stood in 2 rows and quickly greeted the palace master as well as all the others in the hall. Greetings to the palace master. Greetings to the elders. Greetings to the predecessors. Quenching the life source magic weapon was usually after the Jitan realm. These disciples were the younger generation disciples who had great potential. They were clearly the backbone of the Pure Yang Palace, but they would not let them temper their life source magic weapon at this time. The 17 disciples, one of whom has a magic weapon with a golden seal, which consumes the most materials. Elder Zhang Feng introduced and even took out a list and handed it to Mao Kai. Above the list, these disciples were recorded with their merits and when they obtained the sword embryo of the flying swords as a reward, making everything clear. What were the names of the rewarded swords, the characteristics, the materials used and their number, the size and weights, were also clearly written. According to the records on the list, the materials that the Greatest Heaven sect's report said were basically in it. The numbers and the quoted number of the Greatest Heaven sect was about the same, the maximum difference was about 10 jin. 10 jin of difference in materials was impossible to be enough to completely arrange a large welcoming array. All Master Mao, my Pure Yang Palace is not afraid of the Greatest Heaven sect, but I feel that the relationship between the two sides that was established with great difficulty should not be destroyed by the actions of a despicable villain. Elder Zhang Feng had everything in hand, naturally he was not afraid to talk, what words currently does Hallmaster Mao have to say? After Mao Kai finished reading the list, it was not good to say anything. He only gave the list to the Elder Ming Guangruo who did not say anything and ignored the words of Elder Zhang Feng. After seeing the list one by one, the Elder Ming had no expressions on his face. Then he finally said slowly. Speaking of it, it's all on paper. Where are the products of these materials? It would be good to know that these numbers are also true in reality. When the words came out, the faces of the people suddenly changed. Ming Guangruo had always been sitting, but he had always been like a dead tree, converging and unobtrusive. But this time, his words had shocked everyone. Saw with own eyes that seeing was believing. It was clear that these disciples would have to take out the magical treasures that were being tempered and let them see. However, the reason why this life source magic weapon was called the life source magic weapon was because it was necessary to use special methods in the process of quenching to bring the magic weapon into the sea of consciousness for at least a temper for a few decades. Letting the life source magic weapon and the owner have the same mind, this was the initial quenching of this life source magic weapon. The light was the process of this initial tempering, it could not be interrupted, so people who were usually tempering their life source magic weapon would generally choose not to travel. The rogue cultivators would choose to go into seclusion, and those who belonged to Dao sects stayed in their sects. They carefully tempered it and did not dare to slack off. This process could not be interrupted, how could they bring the magic weapon out for others to see? Once interrupted, not only would the life source magic weapon be damaged, but it would also put the several decades of painstaking efforts to waste. Even their own spiritual awareness cultivation base would be affected. These dozens of people, even shy Zhanxian, had seen that the Pure Yang Palace was preparing to vigorously cultivate these disciples, not to mention other people. In this way, Elder Ming was clearly trying to take the opportunity to destroy the follow-up backbone of these Pure Yang Palace disciples. No. This time, it was said by several people, including the palace master and several elders behind him. These disciples, the least one had been tempered for more than 5 years. Once they are taken out, they will be seriously injured and ill. The palace master was really worried, how could this happen? The disciples who have cultivated their own sect would have to abolish their cultivation base of several decades just to convince the greatest heaven sect. It was impossible to make such a deal. No. No. The palace master shook his heads again and again. He was very determined and said to Elder Ming, I don't know if Elder Ming knows, but these are the core disciples of my Pure Yang Palace, and they will not do this. My greatest heaven sect too was ruined, the hatred, the lives of tens of thousands of disciples, this enmity must be repaid. Elder Ming did not speak at first, but he now had started to speak. His opening tone expressed that his words could not be refused, if I do not personally check something, then it is hard to be considered safe. His predecessor untrustworthy of my sect disciples. After all, the palace master oversaw the whole sect. Some things could not be tolerated by him. His bottom line couldn't be crossed, your greatest heaven sect's disciple is a disciple, isn't my Pure Yang Palace's disciple a disciple? Now, I have to let you deal with them. This is not the case. Ming Guangruo was a master of the Daching realm, he naturally carried a majestic manner, it is only a confirmation that the Pure Yang Palace is not the murderer of my sect. If this delays the practice of these disciples. The old man is willing to apologize afterwards. It was indeed a big deal for Jitan realm disciples to receive an apology from a master of the Daching realm, moreover, with the status of the greatest heaven sect's elder. Switch to the general small martial arts sect, under such coercion, they could only comply. However, the Pure Yang Palace was not the same as before, there was also the island master on their side, who was begging for the Pure Yang Palace and Yang Chen's help. Currently, if the palace master did not know the banner of the tiger skin tree, then he was a fool. Since I just confirmed these disciples of my ancestral hall, they will swear an oath on their heart and swear to ensure that those life source magic weapon are true. I think this must satisfy the predecessor. The palace master continued, there are people from the Green Jade Immortal Island here to act as witness, will that be good enough? The vow on their heart, if broken, these disciples could only be trapped in the Jitan realm during the entirety of their lives. They were the core disciples of the Pure Yang Palace. This method was indeed the safest way that the palace master could find without ruining these disciples' decades of cultivation. The eyes of the people returned to Elder Ming, waiting for his decision. Mao Kai did not dare to interject and honestly waited for the elder's order. I do not rely on hearsay. Ming Guangruo thought for a moment and still shook his head, seeing is believing, if I don't look at them with my own eyes, I can't be assured. I have lost tens of thousands of disciples, I must be sure. Still, after that, this old man will personally give them a gift as an apology. But the old man must look. An apology from the predecessor, is it worthy of my sect disciples added up 2,000 years of hard work? The palace master was furious, and facing the elder of the Daching realm he did not back off, is it worth my more than 10 life source magic weapons? How difficult is this? The voice of the palace master had just fallen, the voice of the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island had rung, the greatest heaven sect is a big sect, Elder Ming is the one that increases their skill through spirit pills, some are good for magic weapons as well. When the disciples practiced, they will use the spirit pills to make up the lost cultivation. If the magic weapon gets destroyed, then use a magic weapon to compensate. A fair transaction. Island master, what do you mean? Ming Guangruo was furious when he heard the words of the island master. With his cultivation and his status, even the sect master of the greatest heaven sect did not dare to speak with him in this tone. The island master's cultivation base was just in the middle of the Yuning realm. Even after hearing his words in such a tone, the island master stared coldly at Ming Guangruo's face. What's wrong, Elder Ming? My island master can't even say anything. Ming Guangruo was a master of the Daching realm, but Yan Huifeng, who came with the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island, was not weak. He stood up and looked coldly at Ming Guangruo, his angry aura went straight towards Ming Guangruo. Is the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island planning to make this deal? Ming Guang ignored the anger of Yan Huifeng and stared at the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island while asking aloud. I don't dare, just afraid that one day Elder Ming will find my Green Jade Immortal Island and will use the same reason to ask my sect disciples to abolish their cultivation base. If tens of thousands of your greatest heaven sect disciples die, I don't really care. My Green Jade Immortal Island can withstand no such loss. The words of the island master were preposterous but ironic, an apology can be smoothed out, a good master of the Daching realm, a well-known elder, really worthy of the name. Who was the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island? The leader of the Green Jade Immortal Island. What kind of grave situation had the island master not seen? Despite the lack of cultivation, it was because of the management of the martial arts sect that demanded a lot of effort, which then had led to delays in cultivation promotion. However, in terms of courage, there were still few who could scare the island master. Ming Guangruo was a master of the Daching realm, and there was also the advantage of the greatest heaven sect's illustrious prestige. He also dared to say this to the Puryang Palace, but even if you lend him 10 times more courage, he would not dare to challenge the island master. He could not dare to provoke the enmity between both sides at will. If that's the case, then we will do it according to the island master. Ming Guangruo was stubbornly staring at the island master. He again did not rise in sharp opposition, but rather complied. If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more. Chapter 290 Compensation for Destruction. The strength of the Green Jade Immortal Island could be no worse than that of the Greatest Heaven Sect. The current Greatest Heaven Sect was in great difficulty. Under the circumstance, even if there were secret forces to supplement them, they dare not say that they would win, not to mention that the Green Jade Immortal Island and the Blue Cloud Sect had common interests. It was equivalent to offending both at the same time. Puryang Palace and the beast-taming sect allied together would be even more troublesome. Although the strength of the two small sects was not very good, but each sect had a master of the Daching realm, the strength of both in unity would be extraordinary. If Ming Guangruo was arrogant again, he must also consider the consequences inquiring the anger of the island master at this time. Although Mao Kai and the others were Yuning realm masters, this time they were all staring nervously at the old elder. Only when Elder Ming uttered those words could they finally be relieved. This breath was really unbearable. It was obviously aimed at the Puryang Palace. They thought that this time Elder Ming had come strong with 14 Yuning realm masters and could suppress the Puryang Palace. Who would have expected that the island lord appeared this time and even stood side by side with Puryang Palace? However, the discontentment was not enough. The master of the Daching realm also had to compromise in front of the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island. This was the shocking power of the Green Jade Immortal Island. Even the elders of the Greatest Heaven Sect must consider it. The ears are imaginary, seeing is believing. The island master seemed to be trying hard to crack down on Ming Guangruo's face and said bluntly, this is just Elder Ming's own words, not to take out the things you want to compensate. Why would the Puryang Palace believe that you will give compensation? In lieu of this, could the Daching realm master Elder Ming be not so playful? If this was the case, the Puryang Palace couldn't get angry with the casual talk of Elder Ming. But now it was from the mouth of the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island. Even if it was not good, it must be considered. And take it out. Then change the way. The island master did not give Ming Guangruo the chance to reply and said directly, there are all people who have a vow to swear. How? Puryang Palace disciple can swear, I'm sure that many of your disciples can also swear. This was another army. Since the Greatest Heaven Sect had the idea to destroy a group of reserve corps disciples in the Puryang Palace, then they must also have the mental preparation for the destruction of a group of Yuning realm ancestors. Who didn't know what Ming Guangruo planned? Who had not seen such before? Who wasn't part of the same world? It was more difficult for Ming Guangruo to swear than to let him directly compensate for the loss. Losing a magic weapon was just a magic weapon. Let him swear by his heart and risk his inability to improve his cultivation base. He was a prime master at the Daching realm. How could he and the Puryang Palace's Jitan realm disciples swear together? Moreover, swears on hearts and souls were not so easy to give away. Such a swear with even a little bit of violation could result in countless demons. How could Ming Guangruo say that he had no idea of damaging the Puryang Palace core disciples? It was just that when they set off, they had thought to coerce and lure the Puryang Palace to examine their material possessions. Determine whether they were the real murderers behind the scenes or use this opportunity to completely suppress the Puryang Palace. Who would have thought that they would encounter such a matter, that they would be forced to compensate with medicinal pills and magic weapon on the spot? Now, how could they ever hope to accomplish that? However, Ming Guangruo was Ming Guangruo, the elders of the Greatest Heaven Sect were not stupid, they immediately thought of countermeasures. On one of his hands, a muddy brown ordinary flying sword instantly appeared. This is the old man's life source flying sword. If their own flying sword is destroyed, the old man will use his own flying sword to pay for it. Is that enough? Ming Guangruo's sharp gaze stared straight at the island master, as if shooting flames. The life source flying sword of a great Dacheng realm master was definitely more precious than the Jitan realm disciples' life source flying swords. If Ming Guangruo actually felt attachment with his own flying sword, obviously he had already reached an extreme. Against the 17 life source flying swords of the disciples, aren't you being a big bully? The island master would not be able to say that Ming Guangruo's flying sword was not much better than these Jitan realm disciples and could only talk about the quantity. You. Ming Guangruo was extremely angry but could only say one word and no more. Mao Kai and the other dozens of Yuning realm ancestors who followed him looked at each other. Everyone brushed their hands and summoned their own life source magic weapons. 14 Yuning realm ancestors' life source magic weapons, all were put out in the front. Elder Ming took out his own life source magic weapon, how could his followers not follow suit? This showed that the difference between the greatest heaven sect and other sects. Disciples capable of reaching the Yuning realm were provided the best flying swords by the sect from the beginning, so that these disciples would temper them as their own life source magic weapons. Even less talented disciples with outstanding potential in the Jitan realm would deliberately be cultivated. Other sects would also love to do the same, but they fell short of resources in comparison to the greatest heaven sect. Before in the Puryang Palace, there were 8 Yuning realm masters, but none of them had a life source flying sword. There were no suitable materials available at all, only low-grade materials were used to make life source flying swords. Such weapons would break after only few uses, they were not worth holding a candle to. 15 life source magic weapons were placed in front of everyone. Everyone in the greatest heaven sect's delegation was angry, the subject of the anger was not Puryang Palace, but the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island. In this regard, the Green Jade Immortal Island Master did not care, the secret competition between the Greatest Heaven Sect and the Green Jade Immortal Island was not something new. This small matter would not generate any waves in the hearts of the Green Jade Immortal Island's people. Everyone knew that these masters' life source magic weapons were impossible for the Puryang Palace to acquire otherwise. If it was so simple to get a cultivator's magic weapon, then it would be too easy to cultivate. If they were in the mood, these magic weapons could fly back to their side at any time. At this point, people in the Greatest Heaven Sect group knew that the people of the Green Jade Immortal Island were with the people of the Puryang Palace and were maneuvering this matter together. The Greatest Heaven Sect had to put up with this farce, there wouldn't be much loss, at most they would lose some face. However, to attain such an outcome, they still had to satisfy the people of the Puryang Palace. You only have 15 swords, the others have 17, 2 are missing. Of course, the island master could not let the Puryang Palace miss out on even a little benefit from it. Since everyone was now in an alliance, it was natural to consider such. This time, even Ming Guangruo was generous, and he did not hesitate to take 2 more magic weapons from his body and put them in front. Although these 2 magic weapons were not his own, they were not the same as the other small ones. They were appropriate to be used as life source magic weapons. Are these enough? Ming Guangruo asked and looked at the Green Jade Immortal Island Master. Well, now you have shown a bit of sincerity. The island master was satisfied with the compensation measures and withdrew. My Greatest Heaven Sect's compensation has also been put here, does Palace Master he also express his sincerity? Ming Guangruo, this time, finally turned his eyes to the Puryang Palace Master. At this point, the Palace Master could certainly not hesitate anymore, he directed the 17 Jitan realm disciples to show their life source magic weapons that they were refining. Although there were many unwilling expressions on their faces, these disciples did not oppose the instructions of the Palace Master. Each disciple took out his magic weapon out of his sea of consciousness. The pain due to taking out the life source magic weapon in the middle of refining could be imagined. Even if they were at the Jitan realm, they were still considered masters. A painful expression could be seen on these disciples' faces. After a while, all the disciples were sweating, soon some began to pull out their own magic weapons. Of course, the fastest one was the one who had spent the shortest time refining. Basically, they were taken out according to the time spent on refining them, from shortest to longest. After extracting the magic weapons, all the 17 disciples vomited blood. They looked at the Palace Master and 17 magical treasures that had been tempered for a short time were placed opposite magic weapons of the Greatest Heaven Sect. This time, Mao Kai did not wait for Elder Ming to direct the 2 refiners to check before he did it. The 2 masters did the same as before, picking up each one by one, examining them thoroughly. This time though they were even more careful. It took almost twice as long as the previous inspection, and both traits were checked. After the inspection, no one said anything, just looked at each other and nodded. This confirmed that the materials used in these things were the same as those shown by the Pyongyang Palace. That was to say, the materials of the Pyongyang Palace were not short, all of them were here. Those were used in various degrees in these flying swords, some were also partially refined by now, but now all of them have become waste. Forcibly interrupting after a weapon reaches partial refinement would render the weapon useless. Basically, these weapons will now be completely scrapped. Elder Ming, Hallmaster Mao, the materials mentioned by your sect are all here. What further advices do you wish to impart? The tone of the palace master was unceremonious. There was also a thick intent of warning in his words. As if saying that, if they have no further demands, they should quickly leave. Ming Guangruo would not say anything at this time, the facts had proven that all the materials of the Pyongyang Palace were there and they were not the culprits. Of course, he would not speak. This time, it was really harassment of the hospitality of Palace Master He. Greatest Heaven Sect Foreign Affairs, Hallmaster, Mao Kai brought a smile on his face. Palace Master here, rest assured, I will go back to report to the Sect Master that Pyongyang Palace had nothing to do with this matter. For the arrogance before, please forgive me. I will leave immediately. The group of people stood up and rushed to cup their hands to the Pyongyang Palace's master and then directed the same to the side of the Green Jade Immortal Island master. Ming Guangruo seemed to have thought of something general and curiously asked, I didn't know why the island master personally visited the Pyongyang Palace. Could I ask what had happened? This old person came to talk with Palace Master He about the marriage of my sect Zhanxian with Yang Chen. The leader of the Green Jade Immortal Island said very casually, why? Does Elder Ming's words mean that we must have first gone to the Greatest Heaven Sect to report this before we came here? It was a secret that they came to the Pyongyang Palace to negotiate about the questioning inner heart pill. Of course, they couldn't let the people of the Greatest Heaven Sect know that, and the island master directly pulled out this very plausible reason. Just like Zhanxian was also there, and there had been a rumor about Yang Chen's affairs, no one could find any fault with this reasoning. Zhanxian was a well-known cultivation genius, and Yang Chen's affairs were not so secret as well. It was quite normal for the two to form a tie. Everyone understood this clearly that the Green Jade Immortal Island wanted to pull Yang Chen through Zhanxian. Since Yang Chen could refine the questioning inner heart pill, it was not surprising that the island master of the Green Jade Immortal Island had personally made this trip. But this explanation, it was a perfect cover for the personal visit of the island master. There was nothing more for Ming Guangruo to discuss, he could only cup his hands towards the island master and quickly leave the main hall of the Pyongyang Palace. Zhanxian immediately cleared the hall and showed the delegation out as soon as his eyes met the gaze of the palace master. He then himself left to resume taking care of his responsibilities. The people in the group of the Greatest Heaven Sect walked simply and no one mentioned the magic weapons left behind. Everyone knew that out of these 17 magic weapons, only the last 2 that Ming Guangruo took out were the gifts for the Pyongyang Palace. The other 15 pieces are their magic weapons. It was just a trivial loss for them. Thank you for the help of the island master. The palace master did not accompany the Greatest Heaven Sect's delegation but took the lead to cup his hand to the island master. Several other elders also expressed their gratitude to the several elders of the Green Jade Immortal Island. This time it was really thanks to the master of the Green Jade Immortal Island. Otherwise, the Pyongyang Palace could only bear with the enemy weakly, according to the predetermined plan. Which was formulated by him, Elder Zheng Feng and Yang Chen, culminating with letting the other party leave rampantly. It was with the appearance of the island master, not only did they survive the crisis, but they also won 2 magic weapons as compensation. It is only a slight effort on my part, why must you mention it? The island master smiled and waved, it was such a spectacle, and it was really important to handle Shan'er and Yang Chen's actions, so as to avoid Greatest Heaven Sect suspicions. The palace master could only nod. The island master said that on the one hand, it was the solution, on the other hand, it was to take the opportunity of the 2 people to finalize it. The people of the Greatest Heaven Sect actually acted as notaries in unintentional ways. In any case, the palace master bit his teeth. Extraordinarily, Yang Chen was surrounded by beautiful women. What if he married Sun Qingxu? Gong Sunling of his own sect was no exception. When Yang Chen heard the people leave, he also came to the hall. His spiritual awareness was recovered and he could not hear the last words of the island master. Yang Chen entered through the door and saw the 17 magic weapons left by the Greatest Heaven Sect's delegation on the table. His eyes were bright. Good things, let us see if these things can stay. He did not wait for everyone to react. What was the meaning of Yang Chen? Yang Chen collected the 17 magic weapons and threw them into the medicine garden. Xiao Yan had long been ordered by Yang Chen to consume these weapons' spiritual imprints and refine them. He had been lying in wait. As soon as they were thrown, he swallowed them all. If you're enjoying the content, please give it a like, comment, and subscribe to Fantasy World for more.